started with a silence that wasn't natural. Not static, not interference, just nothing. Like the signal had been erased from existence, and something in that silence felt wrong. Like it was watching us, like it had always been listening. That's when we were sent. Not because we were important, but because no one else wanted to go. Post-Theta 7 was barely worth remembering. It sat alone on the frozen plains of Varnock Prime, near the edge of nowhere. For 16 years, its job was boring but important. Listen for signs of danger. Tyrannid fleets, psyker waves, or worse, chaos energy moving in the dark. For 16 years, it did its job without fail, until 4 nights ago. That's when the station went silent. No screams, no warnings, no emergency code. One moment it was sending its regular hourly signal to the command net, clean, steady, comforting. The next, it was gone, like it had never been there. The Varnock Planetary Defense Force said it was probably a storm. Varnock Prime was famous for its deadly weather, freezing winds, storms of ice so sharp they could skin a man alive, and snow thick enough to bury a building. Those storms could mess with signals, even strong ones. But High Command didn't believe in weather problems, not this far into the Imperium. So they sent us. We were a squad from the 86th Varnock Recon, 6 guardsmen used to moving through hostile terrain, chosen by name by Lieutenant Rylos. Along with us came a young tech priest from the Mechanicus called Magos Viel, and a quiet, hooded man from the Ecclesiarchy. He didn't tell us his name. He didn't need to. We called him the Preacher. The flight to Theta 7 was rough. Our transport shook as it cut through the upper atmosphere. The wind howled outside, but inside we sat in cold silence, packed onto metal benches. Frost covered the walls. Our breath turned to steam in front of us, then disappeared into the ship's venting system. Sergeant Dren had his eyes shut. His lips moved in silent prayer, fingers clutching his laser gun like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Next to him, Sierra checked the tank on her flamer, again. She didn't say anything. She never did, just checked. And rechecked. Ralk and Yuno, our 2 riflemen, whispered nervously to each other. Nothing serious, just old stories, the kind of chatter soldiers use to pretend they aren't scared. Magos. Viel sat alone, whispering in the strange, clicking language of the Mechanicus. His mechanical limbs twitched now and then, like they had minds of their own. I sat across from the Preacher. He hadn't moved once since takeoff. Head bowed, their hands folded in his lap. He didn't look asleep. He didn't look awake either. He looked like someone waiting to die. 2 minutes to drop, the pilot said through the intercom. Everyone looked up. Viel hissed something into his vox bead. The Preacher raised his head. His eyes were open, but they weren't focused. They looked cloudy, like he was looking through us, like he didn't need to see it all. The transport landed hard. The back hatch slammed open and the cold hit us, like a hammer. The wind cut through our gear like we were wearing nothing. Snow and ice blew in every direction. Even with our lights on, we could barely see. Theta 7 stood about 200 meters ahead, gray, square, and half buried in snow. Its antennas were covered in ice, bent like bones. The defense turrets were powered down. There were no lights in the windows. No movement, nothing. Dead. Viel checked his instruments. Power is still running. Generators are active. Then why is there no signal? Ralk asked. Viel didn't answer. We started walking. The snow was deep, up to our knees in some places. Our boots made no sound. The storm roared outside, but inside our helmets, everything was too quiet. Every step felt wrong, like we were walking through a forgotten place that didn't want to be found. When we reached the main door, it was sealed shut. No sign of a fight, no damage, no blood, just a dull red rune glowing above the doorway. Stand ready. The preacher stepped forward. He reached into his robes and pulled out a small brass key. Where he got it, I'll never know. He pressed it into a panel on the wall. Click, the rune changed. Enter in silence. The doors opened, and the silence got worse. Inside, the station wasn't broken. It wasn't dead. It was just dark. No alarms. No lights. Just a single flickering bulb at the end of the hall. The air was thick with cold, and something else. Dust. But not normal dust. It floated too slowly, like it didn't want to land, like gravity had forgotten it. VL checked his scanners. No movement. Thermal? Dren asked. Nothing, too cold to read. We stepped in one by one. The doors closed behind us, and that's when I noticed something terrifying. I couldn't hear my own footsteps, not on the metal floor, not in my ears, not even in my bones. Just nothing. I looked around. Everyone else had noticed too. Juno tapped his Vox bead. Command, this is Recon Team Theta. We've entered the station, beginning sweep. No reply. He tapped it again. Still nothing. He tried once more. Then he said the words we all feared. Vox is dead. Dren raised his laser gun. Tight formation, sweep room by room. No one breaks the line. He turned to the preacher. Any blessings? The preacher didn't speak. He just nodded once, and in that exact moment, the wind stopped. Not outside. Inside. It didn't fade. It just stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. There was no sound at all. And that's when I knew. Theta 7 didn't stop sending signals because it was broken. It stopped because something here wanted to listen. Something old. Something quiet. And we had just walked straight into its home. The door behind us shut with a soft hiss. Too soft. Inside listening post Theta 7, everything was too quiet. Not just normal quiet, wrong quiet. The walls didn't echo. Our boots should have clanked on metal floors. The tech priest's robotic limbs should have buzzed or hissed. But none of it made any sound. It was like we were walking inside a thick bubble where noise wasn't allowed to live. We moved carefully, just as we'd trained. Tight formation, weapons up, lights on. No one said a word unless they had to. Our shoulder-mounted lamps cut through the darkness in narrow red beams, casting long, stretched shadows against the metal walls. At first, we thought the place had been abandoned for weeks, but it was clean, too clean. There was no blood, no signs of damage, no broken gear or bullet holes. Everything was in its place, just the way it was supposed to be. It looked like everyone had simply stopped what they were doing and disappeared. Atmosphere stable, said Magos Viel, our tech priest. His voice came through the squad vox. Oxygen is at 87% efficiency, no poisons, no problems. Syrah, holding her flamer close, answered sharply, then where the hell is everyone? She was right to ask. 14 people had been assigned to Theta 7, 8 station techs, 4 communications officers, 1 engineer, and 1 medici. Not one of them was responding. We passed a sealed cogitator room. The lights were still on inside. A meal tray sat beside a console, a bowl of soup. The liquid inside was frozen solid. Ralk leaned in. That should have gone bad. But it's still. Here, still whole. They froze, Juno said, voice low. Maybe the heat failed. Maybe they just froze to death. No, Viel replied quickly. Power levels show no drop. Backup systems were never triggered. This station hasn't lost energy once in the past 12 years. Enough, barked Sergeant Dren. Eyes forward. Weapons ready. Move. And so we did. We followed the main corridor deeper into the outpost. Something felt strange. Not the temperature or the smell. Those were normal for a remote post. It was the way the walls seemed to close in. The halls weren't actually small, but they felt like they were. Like we were walking through a tunnel designed to push us together. to make us feel watched. "This place feels like it's waiting," Sira muttered. Dren pointed to a small control panel on the wall. "Viel, open it." The tech priest extended a metal limb, one of many. A plug clicked into the panel. The cover slid open. Behind it was a Vox unit, still powered. "Still sending." Viel stared at it. "It's broadcasting." "What?" Dren asked. "Broadcasting what?" Viel replied. "An empty channel. The signal is going out, but there's no message, no voice, just silence." "That's not possible," Ralk said. "You can't send nothing. Silence isn't a message." Viel turned his head slowly. "Incorrect. Silence is data. It can be encoded. It can be amplified." None of us understood what that meant, but we would. Soon, the command room was 20 minutes deeper into the station. No one stopped us. No locks, no alarms, no traps. Just emptiness. The command table sat in the center of the room. Empty chairs, neatly stacked data slates, a few old cups. Burnt incense. It looked like the crew had been here recently, but the system logs were gone. Viel tried every console, every login code, and every emergency override. Access. Denied user removed system. Clean. Finally, the screen lit up with a strange message. "Welcome to silence. We froze." "That's not standard," Juno said. Viel nodded slowly. "No, it's not." Then the preacher stepped forward. He hadn't spoken once since we entered Theta 7. He didn't walk like other men. His boots made no sound, no metal clicks, no heavy steps. He reached into his robe and pulled out a small strip of parchment. It was covered in red ink, a sacred text from the ecclesiarchy. Normally, it would be read out loud and then burned. But he did something different. He unfolded it and held it above the command console. The words began to lift, die, burn, not fade. They peeled away like smoke from the fire, floating off the paper into the air. Then they vanished. "What was that?" Ralk whispered. The preacher finally spoke. "This place has been claimed." "By who?" Dren asked. "Not a who," the preacher replied. "A what?" "We kept moving, down into the living quarters. That's when we found the first sign of real violence, a smear of blood. At first, it was just a few drops near the mess hall, then a long red drag smeared across the wall like someone had fallen and crawled." Sira raised her flamer. "Someone was hurt." We followed the trail. It led to a locked door. Viel opened it using his tools. The room was a crew chamber, small, a bed, a desk, a shrine to the Emperor, and someone was inside, curled up on the floor, shaking, still alive. "The Medikey." He looked at us, but his eyes were wide and wild. His mouth, it had been sewn shut, not neatly, not medically. Thick threads, deep cuts. Blood had dried across his face. His ears were sealed with black wax. He couldn't hear, and he couldn't speak, but he saw us, and he began to scream. No sound came out. Juno rushed forward and grabbed his shoulders. "Medikey, what happened?" The man trembled, his fingers clawing at Juno's chest. He began to draw letters, again and again. Psi, L-E-N-C. Ethan. He began to shake violently, once, twice, and then he stopped moving. Blood oozed from his sealed lips. Viel scanned him. No injuries, no wounds, cause of death. Brain overload. "He died screaming," Sira whispered, but we couldn't hear it. Dren stepped back. "Leave him. We're not taking anything." "Sir," I said, "maybe we shouldn't be here at all." That's when the lights went out. All of them, not a flicker, just instant black. We couldn't see, and worse, we couldn't hear. No hum of lights, no breaths, no movement, no heartbeats. It was like the sound itself had been stolen. Then, just ahead in the hallway, a flicker, a shape. Not walking, not running, just standing. Still, watching. A human figure. No face, no features, just a dark outline standing in the blinking glow of a backup light. We raised our weapons. The lights blinked back on. The figure was gone. But where it had been, 3 words had appeared on the wall, written in something dark. Do not speak. We didn't say anything for a long time, not because we were following orders, because we were scared. The words on the wall, do not speak, were burned deep into the metal, not written in blood, not scratched by a panicked hand. They were burned, clean and sharp, like someone had carved them carefully with heat and purpose. It wasn't a message from a madman, it was a command, and even though we didn't know who wrote it, it felt like it was meant for us. When the lights came back on, Sergeant Dren gave the order. "Tighten up," he said, but his voice came out soft, too soft. I almost couldn't hear him. He cleared his throat and tried again, louder this time, still muffled. "Something's wrong with the air," Juno said. "Feels like we're underwater." Viel, the tech priest, moved forward. "Sound is being changed," he said. "The walls, the floors, every surface in this station absorbs sound. It's not just quiet, it's designed to be this way." Ralk turned to him. "So what does that mean?" Viel's mechanical voice clicked. "It means the station is eating sound." The preacher hadn't moved since the lights returned. He just stared at the wall. The message. Sirah walked up to him. "You know what this is, don't you?" The preacher turned slowly, raised a finger to his lips. "Shh," that was his answer. "We carried the medic's body to the infirmary. He was already dead. We knew that, but it felt wrong to leave him lying there, twisted and silent, his lips sewn shut, his ears sealed with wax. The infirmary looked perfect. No signs of struggle. No mess. The beds were made. The tools were clean. Everything looked like it had just been wiped down." Juno picked up a scalpel. "Nothing's been used. Not in days." Rolk stared at the screen on the wall. A repeating security feed. Every few seconds, static would flicker, and just before the image reset, a figure would appear only for a split second, standing still, staring into the camera, never moving. "Every time," Rolk whispered. "It's always there." Sirah opened a cold storage unit. Inside were 6 bodies, preserved, cold, but not decayed. Each of them had their mouths sewn shut. Some were missing fingers. One had no eyes, and on their chests, crudely carved, was the aquila, the symbol of the Imperium. But it wasn't a sign of loyalty. It had been ripped into their flesh in mockery. Viel scanned them. No infection, no signs of decay. Their bodies were held in stasis, frozen in place. For a purpose. What kind of purpose? I asked. The preacher stepped forward. For the first time in hours, he spoke. His voice was barely more than a whisper. For the silence. We regrouped in the barracks. Still no sign of the crew, no sounds, no messages. But that's when I noticed something terrifying. I hadn't heard my own voice in over an hour. I tapped my helmet's Vox system. Nothing. I clapped my hands. Nothing. I tried to cough. Still nothing. I looked around. Everyone else was doing the same. Tapping gear, whispering, snapping fingers. Nothing made a sound. Viel's voice broke the silence through our internal comms. "You're not deaf," he said. "The station is bending. Sound around you. It's filtering noise. It decides what you hear." "What do you mean it decides?" Dren asked. Viel answered, "It's not just muting us. It's replacing sound with silence and transmitting it through us, into us." Sirah stepped back. "So it's trying to control sound itself?" "No," Viel said coldly. "It's trying to erase it." Then we heard something. For the first time in hours, a sound broke through, a soft metallic scraping, dragging. It came from the hallway just outside the barracks. We raised our weapons. The sound came again. Closer this time. Sirah took point. Dren stepped into the hallway. "Hold position," he ordered. Then he froze. He twitched, just once. Then he grabbed the side of his helmet like something inside was screaming at him. He turned back toward us. Blood was running from his ears. His mouth opened, his lips moving fast, but no words came out. His eyes were wide. Fear beyond reason. Then he dropped to his knees and started shaking. We dragged Dren back into the barracks. He was convulsing hard, like something was moving under his skin. Sira pinned him down. Juno yanked off his helmet. Ralk checked his vitals. Nothing made sense, no signs of trauma. The preacher knelt beside him. He pulled out a small silver charm, engraved with an aquila. It was wrapped in thin parchment covered in prayers. He pressed it to Dren's forehead and whispered something. We didn't hear the words, but Dren did. His eyes snapped open. For a second he looked at us, then he went still. Dead. His face was frozen, in a look of horror, mouth open, eyes wide, as if he'd seen something so terrifying it stopped his heart. Sira backed away. He looked straight at me. Juno wiped his face, pale with shock. He tried to say something. What? I asked. Juno didn't answer. He walked to the wall and wrote in the dust, "Don't listen." We sealed the barracks behind us. 6 of us were left now. The preacher led us down a narrow corridor deeper into the station. Viel believed he could find the security logs, something that would tell us what happened here. The air was colder, thinner, not because the station was failing, because something was taking the air. Every step felt harder. Every hall seemed emptier, like we were walking through a dream that had forgotten it was real. Finally, we reached the cogitator core. The walls buzzed faintly with power. The screens were on, but they didn't show data. No codes, no feeds, no maps, only words, repeating over and over. In silence, we heard truth. In truth, we unlearned speech. The first sound was a lie. The last silence will be God. Viel stared at the display, visibly shaken. This wasn't just a cult, he said. This was a signal. He turned to us. They weren't worshipping silence. They were spreading it. The cogitator chamber pulsed with cold, flickering light. The walls were covered in screens, dozens of them. Some blinked, others flashed with strange symbols, but none of them showed useful data. No security logs, no access codes, no controls. Just the same 4 lines, repeating again and again across every display. In silence, we heard truth. In truth, we unlearned speech. The first sound was a lie. The last silence will be God. Viel moved slowly as if the room itself might attack him. His metal limbs twitched with caution. He connected his mechadendrites to the terminals, one by one, checking each station. There is no command interface, he said. Only one thing is running. A broadcast loop. What kind of loop? Juno asked, holding his rifle tighter. Viel didn't look away from the screen. This message is being transmitted over and over, but not from within the station's main systems. Then from where? Sira asked. Viel paused. From inside the transmitter array itself. The room went quiet. We had all lost people. Dren was gone. The Medici was dead. The crew was either mutilated or missing. We were tired, frozen, afraid. But something about Viel's words made all of us listen. The station wasn't sending this message. The signal was, it was alive. Viel adjusted a control node. I'm attempting to access archived recordings, audio logs from the relay. You sure that's smart? I asked. No, he said without pause. He activated the relay. A low hum filled the chamber. It wasn't loud, but we felt it. A vibration deep inside our skulls, like something massive moving through the dark. Not a sound we heard, but something. We felt in our teeth, our bones, our blood. Then the speakers made a sharp click, static, but not normal static. It wasn't random. It was layered, thick, and deliberate. And under that static, we heard it. A voice, slow, warped, broken. It didn't sound human, not anymore. It came through like it had been stretched across time itself. Will not hear until you are empty. Juno stepped back, shaking. Turn it off. VL didn't. Not yet. The voice spoke again. No more speech. No more noise in you now. The lights dimmed. The walls felt closer. We all grabbed our heads, not because it hurt, but because we felt pressure inside our ears, like something was pushing into us. The preacher raised one trembling hand. Enough, he whispered. VL shut down the system. Silence returned. We gasped for breath. My eyes burned. My ears rang with nothing. What was that? I asked, voice hoarse. The preacher kept staring at the dark screen. The silence, he said. Its voice, but not a voice like ours, not a voice for human minds. Rolk leaned against the wall, drenched in sweat. That wasn't static, that wasn't broken tech. No, the preacher said, that was a sermon. We regrouped in the corridor. No one said anything, not on Vox, not aloud, not even to each other. Not because we couldn't, but because we were afraid to. The silence had become something more than a lack of sound. It felt alive now, like it was, watching. Like every sound we made would wake something sleeping. We felt it around us. Not a spirit, not a warp entity, something worse, something that knew us, that understood listening better than speaking. Sierra whispered, "It's still here." VL didn't look up. "No," he said. "It never left." We checked the barracks again. Dren's body was gone. No trail, no drag marks, no blood. Just missing. Where he had fallen, there was now a fresh message on the wall. It hadn't been there before. Written in black grease, the words were sharp and cold. "You cannot speak it dead." Juno stared at the writing. "What does that mean?" I didn't answer, because deep down, I already knew. We moved toward the shrine room. Every outpost had one. Even the smallest stations, a place for prayer, for remembrance. In final words, we found it deep inside the structure. Cold, dark. The aquila, the symbol of the emperor, was carved above the altar. But it had been changed, twisted, bent inward like a broken wing. It no longer stood for faith or strength. It looked like silence given form, muteness carved into steel. On the altar, stacked neatly, were human tongues. 14 of them, each one is nailed in place with cold steel pins. VL scanned the pile. Organic matter, still fresh, no rot. Air system is preserving them. "How many?" Sierra asked again. 14, he said. The same number as the missing crew. Juno knelt beside the altar. His face was pale. "They didn't just go missing. They gave up speech," I said. "No," the preacher corrected. "It was taken." He reached into his robe and pulled out a small wrapped object, a cloth bundle. He opened it. Inside was a small data crystal. Strange symbols covered it. Symbols none of us recognized. VL took it carefully, scanned it with his auspex. "This isn't Mechanicus," he said. "It's older. Ancient dialect. Pre-heresy code. Mentions a group from Terra. A silence-worshipping sect." Juno looked shocked. "That's impossible." "No," the preacher said. "It's heresy, and heresy doesn't die. It waits." VL kept reading. "There's a title at the top." "What does it say?" I asked. VL turned the screen toward us. 4 words, faded red. "The cult that worshipped silence." We stared in silence. Sierra suddenly turned toward the altar and raised her flamer. "I'm burning this now." "Wait," the preacher said. "You want to keep this?" she snapped. "I want to understand it." "Why?" He looked her in the eyes. "Because we are not the first to find it. As we turned to leave the shrine, I looked back. The tongues were gone. No sound, no movement. But in their place, written in fresh blood on the altar stone, we never left. After we left the shrine, no one said a word, even those of us who still could. It wasn't something we agreed on. It just happened, like instinct, like the way a man might hold his breath if a predator brushed past in the dark. We moved in silence, because speaking now felt wrong, dangerous, like sound itself had become the enemy, like even a whisper might call something out of the walls. The station felt colder now. Not by numbers, VL confirmed that temperature was stable, but in another way, a deep cold, like something was crawling into our skin and gnawing at the back of our minds. It didn't freeze our fingers, it froze our thoughts. We swept the western wing, checking the last rooms, barracks, data vaults, comms, maintenance stations, all untouched, too perfect. Like a museum built after the end of the world. That's when we found it, a sealed room, door is half frozen, coated in frost. The hinges groaned as Veal forced it open, and what we saw inside didn't belong on an Imperial station. The walls were black, not painted, smeared, with ash. Thick layers of it, like someone had burned 100 books and then used the ashes to draw. Circles, spirals, tight, endless loops that started at the edges and ended in the center, right at a rough stone altar. Crude, sharp, stained with old blood, and behind it, carved directly into the ferrocrete, was a giant mural. No emperor, no saints, no stars, just one. Massive open mouth, endless, consuming, swallowing a beam of light. Inside that light, we saw words being devoured. Broken words, shattered language. Syrah trembled. She didn't say anything, but I saw her fists clench like she wanted to tear the image off the wall. Juno crouched near the altar. There were smashed objects stacked beneath it. Prayer books, vox units, holy charms, all broken, but not in a rage, in order, set in geometric patterns like a ritual of destruction. Rulk picked up one of the torn prayer books. The pages had all been wiped clean. In their place, just one word. Repeated, quiet, quiet, quiet. The preacher stepped forward. For the first time, he removed his gloves. His hands were covered in scars, old burns, some fresh, others faded. His fingertips were blackened, cracked, and barely healed. He placed his hand flat on the altar, closed his eyes. The room held its breath. Then he whispered, "This liturgy is ancient, older than the schism of Mars, older than unification." Opened his eyes and looked at us. It began on Terra, before the Emperor walked the world, a belief that silence was purity, that noise was falsehood, that language was a disease. Ralk's voice trembled. "So what did they do?" "They let go," the preacher said, "of speech, of memory, of identity." Veal tapped a panel on the wall. A screen flickered to life. What played wasn't a log. It was a ritual, a low-resolution feed, grainy and gray, but clear enough. 10 people stood in a circle around the altar. They wore station uniforms, but the fabric was torn, dirty, changed. At the center stood a man with an officer's insignia, the station overseer. He held a blade. One by one, each person in the circle opened their mouth and cut out their tongue. No screams. No shaking. Just calm, quiet obedience. Each tongue was placed in a basin at the altar. Then the overseer stepped forward and ripped off his ears. Blood poured down his face. He didn't stop. He knelt, drew a spiral in ash and blood. Then he looked directly into the camera and he spoke. No lips, no tongue, no sound, but we all heard it, inside our minds. It is purer without the word. Syrah smashed the screen with her elbow. Glass shattered, but the room didn't feel any different. We did. Juno threw up into his rebreather. Ralk sat on the ground, arms shaking. Even the preacher had gone pale. He moved his lips, mouthing prayers, but no sound came out. Viel said, quietly, "There is no sign of warp corruption, no demonic presence. This isn't chaos." "Then what is it?" I asked. Viel stared at the mural. The endless mouth, the words disappearing. "I think," he said, "they found something older." We left the ritual chamber without speaking. The corridors were colder now, not by temperature, by feel. Every light flickered, every shadow stretched too far. The station was watching us, not with cameras, not with servitors, but with stillness and pressure, and an emptiness that grew every time we dared to think. It didn't feel like walking through silence anymore. It felt like silence was walking through us. I couldn't stop thinking about the words carved into the altar room. It is purer without the word. Had the crew gone mad, or had they become clear? Was sound the lie? Was silence the truth? These weren't just random questions anymore. They were becoming my thoughts, and even my thoughts were growing quiet. We made camp in the auxiliary cogitator room. We needed rest. We set 4-hour rotations, one on watch, the others sleeping in shifts. I took the first watch, sat beside a small data pad, opened it, started writing. Not because I think anyone will read this, not because I believe I'll live, but because something inside me whispered that writing matters. That, if this thing, this silence, wants to erase everything, then a written word might still resist it. Even if a voice cannot, even if we all vanish, even if I disappear. The pad blinked, waiting for words, and I wrote just one line. I don't know where it came from, but I think it's true. And when I finished writing it, I felt like I could still breathe. So long as one voice resists, the silence is not yet God. I didn't sleep after my watch. I doubt anyone else did either. When it was time to wake Viel, I found him already sitting up, staring blankly at the cogitator screen like it was whispering to him. His auspex lay beside him, powered on but untouched. The green light blinked calmly in standby. "You dream?" I asked him quietly. He turned to look at me. His mechanical eyes reflected the soft lumen glow. "I don't think I remember how," he said. "We moved out at first light, or what passed for light in a place like this. Sierra was the one who suggested going deeper." "There's something beneath us," she said. Viel confirmed it. His scans showed odd shapes in the lower levels, rooms that didn't match any Imperial blueprints. A collapsed tunnel, an unfinished conduit, storage areas with no logs. That alone was enough to raise alarms. Imperial structures are never unaccounted for. The preacher stepped forward. "If this heresy has roots," he said, "they will be found in the dark." So we went down. There was no power to the lower levels. We descended the lift shaft by hand, climbing icy ladder rungs that bent under our weight. The further we went, the worse it felt. Not colder on the outside, but deeper inside. Like our souls were being pressed between stones. Like something old and dreaming stirred beneath us, and our presence was waking it up. When we finally reached the bottom, our helmet lenses began to fog. Viel checked our suits. "Environmental seals are intact," he said. "There's no reason for this." But it kept happening. Mist forming inside sealed gear. Something didn't want us to see clearly. The corridor ahead was lined with Vox units. All of them were broken, torn open, wires ripped out, speakers shattered like cracked bones, and they were all turned to face one direction, toward a door at the far end of the hallway. Not a steel bulkhead, not a standard hatch, a wooden door, heavy, reinforced with rusted iron. The kind of door you see in a church. The kind of door you aren't supposed to open. No Imperial record mentioned anything like it. No construction notes. No chapels are listed here, and yet it stood like it had grown there over time. The preacher walked up and placed his hand on the frame. He didn't push. The door opened on its own. The room beyond was massive, circular, hollowed from the stone of the planet. The walls were supported by thick, ancient beams, no purity seals, no holy marks, just cold, silent metal. In the center stood a black altar, and surrounding it were rows of kneeling bodies, hundreds of them, all still, all silent, all facing forward. Some wore tattered uniforms we didn't recognize. Others were dressed in ritual robes or barely covered in rags. Some had no eyes, some had mouths sewn shut with thick cords, but all of them were upright. Hands folded, like statues, like a choir waiting for their conductor. "They're not rotting," Sira whispered. "Are they dead?" "No," Viel said, checking his auspex. "They're not transmitting life signs, but they're not dead either." "Stasis?" Juno asked, nervous. "Something like it." We walked carefully between the rows. I tried not to look directly at the bodies, but I swear, some of them turned their heads. Just a little. Just enough to follow us. Juno jumped. That one moved. The preacher raised a hand. "Do not touch them. They have given up their voice, and it has filled them with stillness." Ralk stopped. At the altar. "There's writing," he said. He brushed off the frost. We all gathered close. The words weren't in Low Gothic, not even in Mechanicus code. Viel's auto-translator struggled, but slowly it began to parse the symbols. "Through silence we were made. Through silence we shall remain. Through silence the stars will open again." Juno looked around the room. "What are they waiting for?" The preacher answered, a reply. Then something inside the altar moved. A hidden panel slid open with a hiss. Inside sat an old Vox recorder. Analog Viel pulled it free. It powered on the moment he touched it. It began to play. What we heard was not a message. It was us, our voices, our footsteps, our squad transmissions, all recorded, played back in reverse. Over that, something deeper. A voice, slow, heavy, like it was crawling through stone. "They hear you. They are listening now. You brought the noise with you. It is inside you." The playback stopped. Silence returned. The kneeling figures hadn't moved, but now they were smiling. Sira raised her flamer. "We end this now." "No," the preacher said, stepping in front of her. "Not yet." "What are we waiting for?" she shouted. "They're wrong. All of this is wrong." The preacher didn't answer right away. Then he looked back at the room. "This isn't a grave," he said. "It's a temple." Juno frowned. "To what?" The preacher said nothing, but I understood. This place wasn't made to protect anything. It was made to preserve something. The silence. To keep it alive. To feed it. And to teach others how to join it. We left the room quickly after that. Back through the shaft. One at a time. Climbing was harder this time, heavier, like gravity had grown stronger, but it wasn't gravity, it was dread. And halfway up the ladder, I realized something. Ralk was gone. He had been behind me, just one step below. I looked down. Nothing. No sound. No scream. No fall. Just gone. We searched the corridor above. Called his name. Checked our flanks. Nothing. Then we heard it. A whisper. Not through ears. Through thoughts. He asked a question. We turned to the nearest wall. And there, it was fresh dripping, carved in blood. "Do not seek answers. Only silence remains." Ralk was gone. He had been right behind me on the ladder. I could hear him climbing, his boots scraping, his breathing steady, the faint jingle of his gear. That sound, even in this strange silence, had been real, grounding. Then suddenly it vanished. No slip, no fall, just gone. Not even silence, just absence. An emptiness where he should have been. We climbed back up and searched the upper corridor. Sira scanned for life signs. Juno called out his name. Viel checked the shaft sensors. Nothing. No drop in weight, no shift in pressure, no sign that anyone had fallen or moved away. He couldn't have just disappeared, Juno said, voice tight. There was no impact. No physical exit, Viel confirmed. Then where is he? Sirah snapped. The preacher stood still, eyes narrowing. He's gone where speech cannot reach, he said. Some doors don't open with words. Some are opened by forgetting. We pushed deeper into the corridor and found a sealed door. The label read, Auxiliary Vox Station 3. It wasn't in VL's records, and yet it was there. Solid. Real. Humming. Faintly, the walls around it were spotless. Cleaner than anywhere else in the station. No ash, no blood, no symbols. Just polished metal, as if someone had wiped history from the walls. The door opened easily. No resistance. Inside was a control. Room banks of old Vox terminals lined the walls. Dim green lights blinked in slow patterns. A massive receiver tower stood in the middle, like a spine reaching through the floor. And at its base sat a small, battered recorder. Viel approached it. This isn't standard issue, he said, frowning. This device is centuries out of date, possibly pre-Crusade. Then what's it doing here? I asked. The preacher answered quietly. It's listening. Before anyone could speak again, the recorder clicked and began to play. At first, just static, not white noise, but dense, like a thick liquid sliding through wires. Then voices, familiar voices, our voices, layered, distorted, slowed down, and reversed. Sweep. Sweep the corridor. I hear something. Vox is dead. Dead. The words looped, folded over themselves, became a choir of echoes. Not speech anymore, just noise, shaped like memory. Then came something different. Voice that wasn't ours. It didn't speak in clear words. It was quieter than a whisper. Not a sound, but a feeling that slithered into your thoughts and deleted parts of you on the way in. Noises inside you. You carry them. We eat what you remember. Viel grabbed his head. Sparks flew from his implants. It's rewriting, he shouted. This signal isn't a message, it's a correction. Juno looked at him, pale. Correction? It's replacing what we think we said. It's changing memory. Sirah raised her flamer. Then we burn. The preacher raised a hand. Wait. A monitor beside the recorder flickered on. It showed a timestamp. Playback, log 56, 12:07 subject, Rock Yorvan. We stared at it. Viel tapped the console. The screen blinked again, then showed a grainy video feed. Rock, sitting on the bench in this very room. He looked tired. His armor was scratched. His eyes are full of fear. This is Guardsman Varn. I don't know where the squad is. I got separated. I think I heard my mother's voice. I followed it. The station changed around me. He stopped, looked at the camera, then leaned closer to the mic. If anyone hears this, don't listen to it. That's how it finds you. Through your memories, through your love, through your own voice. The screen flickered, then his mouth opened, and what came out was not sound, not even silence. It was nothing, nothing that had weight. My chest tightened, stumbled back. I could feel the absence like a punch. The recording ended. I didn't hear anything, Juno whispered. Exactly, Viel said. That's the point. The preacher walked over to the recorder and shut it off. Slowly, deliberately. Rock is not dead, he said. We all turned to him. What do you mean? Sirah asked. He has been claimed, the preacher said. He accepted the vow. Juno's hand hovered near his weapon. What vow? The preacher said nothing. He reached into his cloak and brought out a small cloth bundle. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was something wet. Flesh, Rock's tongue, wrapped in parchment, One word, written in blood, returned. We didn't talk after that. None of us had anything left to say. The walls felt closer, the corridor tighter, like the station had begun folding in on itself. Like it had grown tired of waiting and was now preparing to close the door behind us. Then came the sound, not through the air, not through the vox, through our thoughts. A song, a choral harmony. Soft, beautiful, wordless, but heavy. Not music like we knew. It was like something old was singing with our memories. I felt something shift inside me, a memory I'd clung to. A warm laugh from my younger brother slipped away. I tried to hold on to it, but it was just gone, replaced by the song. Sira dropped to her knees, her helmet clattered to the floor. She cried out, "I can't remember my own name." Viel was scanning wildly. The song, it's in our heads. The transmission is no longer outside, it's inside us now. The preacher rushed to Sira and placed his hand on her head. He whispered slowly, clearly, "I name you. You are Sira. Evanthi, you are a guardsman of the 86th Varnock Recon. You serve the Emperor." Her breathing slowed, she blinked, and for a moment we saw her again. But the song, it was still there, still rising, still singing, and I realized something horrible. This wasn't just a transmission. It was conversion, and we were running out of time. Sira was still on her knees, her eyes were wide, staring at something far away. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Not because she was injured, not because she was afraid, but because her words had left her. Viel moved quickly, running another Auspex scan. His voice came through the vox, tight, low, urgent. "Psychic pressure has increased by 400%, he said. "It's no longer just background radiation. The station is feeding." Juno tightened his grip on his las rifle. "Feeding on what?" "Identity," Viel replied. "Language, thought, memory, everything that makes a human themselves." Sira's breath hitched. Her hands shook. She looked at me, and for a moment I didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, but because something inside me had changed. Something had been removed, and that missing piece made her feel like a stranger. The choir's silent song still echoed somewhere in the back of my head. It didn't have lyrics. It didn't even have music. Just pressure, direction. It was drawing a path away from who I was. The preacher moved toward the nearest wall. He opened a small vial of sacred oil, dipped 2 fingers in, and tried to draw the aquila, the Emperor's holy symbol, but the oil slid right off the metal, wouldn't stay. It rolled down in long streaks, like the wall was rejecting it. Viel watched. "The station resists consecration." The preacher nodded. "It has made a different covenant now." Juno turned away, eyes sharp. "Then we go, back to the surface. We call for evac." The preacher didn't even flinch. "There is no evacuation." "What are you talking about?" Viel cut in. "The signal's power has grown. It's no longer confined to the station. It's broadcasting, off-world, maybe even off-system." My stomach dropped. "You mean it's been spreading this whole time?" Viel nodded. "And worse, it's stronger because of us. We brought voices, noise, attention." Sira's head jerked up. She mouthed something. I leaned closer. She whispered, "It knows we're here." That's when we saw it, lying in the center of the hallway just past the vox chamber, a human tongue. Fresh, pink, severed cleanly, but no blood. It wasn't dropped in panic. It was placed. A small parchment tag lay beside it, pinned to the floor with a scrap of silver wire. The message was burned directly into the cloth. "Tithe accepted." Viel scanned the biometrics. Human, male, but not Rolk. I frowned. "So, someone else?" The preacher's voice was quiet. "There are more now, more than when we arrived." Juno snapped his gaze toward him. "What do you mean?" "There are new worshippers," the preacher said. "They are made in silence. One by one, we followed the trail of tongues through a maintenance level that was supposed to be sealed. The deeper we went, the stranger things became. Torn strips of cloth were tied to vents, each one smeared in ash or blood. Symbols were drawn across the walls, doors, even on the ceilings. Chalk lines twisted into spirals and mouth-like shapes, and everywhere, drawings of mouths, open, smiling, devouring, always smiling. VL stopped beside one large spiral etched into the wall. He raised his auspex. Motion detected, he said. Juno raised his weapon. Where? VL blinked. Not ahead, he said slowly. Behind. We turned around. Nothing, but something had changed. The air was heavy now. My ears popped. I tasted blood. Sierra leaned against the wall and began whispering numbers. 23, 23, 23. What are you doing? I asked. If I stop counting, I'll forget, she said. If I forget, I'll disappear. The preacher walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. Count slower, he said gently. Make the numbers last. The hallway opened into a chamber. It had once been a medici bay, but it had been changed. The beds were pushed into a circle. In the middle is an altar, not a sacred one. This was made from broken vox casings, bent augmetic limbs, and wiring shaped into teeth, and laid across the top were 5 tongues, pinned down with small silver nails. They were still twitching. Juno turned away. Emperor, help us. Next to each tongue was a note, handwritten, delicate. Veal read the first one. I used to say my daughter's name. Now she whispers to me. The next, the last command I obeyed was a lie. I don't need it now. Another. We spoke too much. This is peace. They weren't cries for help. They were hymns. Then we heard the sound again, that dragging noise, metal scraping over metal. A figure appeared in the far doorway. He wore a torn guard's uniform, dark with dried blood. His chest was bare. A spiral mouth symbol is carved across it. His lips had fused, not stitched, grown together. His face was peaceful. He raised one hand and held out a tongue, still wet, still warm. He stepped forward and placed it gently on the altar. Then he turned and walked away. No threat, no fear, just devotion. We didn't stop him. None of us moved. We couldn't, because in that moment, we all understood. We were being watched, judged. The preacher approached the altar. He didn't touch the offerings. He whispered a prayer, not to the emperor, to truth. Then he stood. This is not a cult, he said. This is something older, a revelation. Juno raised his Lazarifal. Then we end it. I agree. Syrah aimed her flamer. Viel held up a hand. No. What now? Syrah asked, angry. If you burn this, the signal might react. Vieli explained. It might try to defend itself. Meaning? I asked. It could grow louder, the preacher nodded. And if it grows louder, it might never stop. Juno looked at me. What do we do? And I realized something terrifying. I didn't know anymore. Because even inside my own head, my thoughts were beginning to whisper. We backed away from the altar, step by step. No flame, no shots, just silence. We turned the corner and Rock was there, standing, pale, eyes wide but empty. He raised one hand, opened his mouth. There was no tongue, no voice, just a darkness inside his throat, a void, and in the blink of an eye, he vanished, gone. Only one thing remained, burned into the wall behind him, your turn. We couldn't move, not from fear, not from exhaustion, but because something unseen held us in place. It was like the silence around us had weight, like the words burned into the wall behind Ralk had frozen our muscles from the inside. Out your turn. The message wasn't scratched or scrawled, it was burned with precision into the ferrocrete wall. No soot, no scorch marks, just clean, perfect heat. Like a brand meant for the soul. Ralk was gone again, but the memory of him, of what he had become, remained in the air like smoke. Juno raised his rifle. "We have to go after him." "No," the preacher said firmly. "That is no longer Ralk. That is what remains when you surrender your voice." Syrah's jaw clenched. "Then we burn what remains." But the preacher didn't reply. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than orders. We didn't argue. We just walked. The corridor ahead bent downward, not like a stairwell, not like a proper shaft. It just sloped, a hallway that seemed to sink deeper into the planet, one step at a time. There were no lights now, no direction, and still, we followed. Not because we were brave, because there was no other way. As we descended, things began to change. At first, it was simple. Our footsteps stopped making noise. Then the hiss of our rebreathers faded. Then the hum of our equipment, even the beat of our hearts, grew quiet. We were walking into mute reality, a space where the very idea of sound was being erased. But none of us stopped, none of us spoke, because deep down, we understood. The deeper we went, the less of us would return. Eventually, we reached it. A wide circular chamber opened before us, like the mouth of some great mechanical god. I call it the chapel below, though no one said that name aloud. It just felt right. The walls were made of dark stone and polished steel, curved like the inside of a bell. Frost clung to every surface, but it didn't melt from our presence. In the center hovered a massive altar. It didn't sit on the floor. It floated, slowly turning in place. Carved into its surface were shifting runes, symbols that bled and changed, the longer you looked at them. My eyes watered just trying to focus. Surrounding the altar, arranged in perfect circles, were kneeling figures, dozens, maybe hundreds, all dressed in black robes. All still as statues. None of them had mouths, not stitched, not cut. Their lips had grown shut, skin sealed over where the mouth should be, smooth and pale. And even though they didn't move, I knew they were watching us. Viel raised his auspex, chirped once, then died. He tapped it again. There's no power source, but every scan I attempt returns the same result. "What result?" I asked. He looked at me slowly. "It's speaking in our own thoughts, repeating them, judging them." The silence had grown heavy, so much so that even thinking felt difficult, like the air around us was thick with invisible pressure. Every thought echoed back at me with suspicion. We stepped closer to the altar. It hovered over a black obelisk, slowly rotating, smooth on every surface except one. On that surface were names, thousands of them. I scanned the list and then I saw it. Near the bottom, Ralk, Jorven, Dren Valen, Magos Viel, Syrah Evante, Juno Kar, Acolyte Varn Aelric, my name already. "Carved, already waiting," Syrah whispered. "How did it know?" But I was too stunned to answer. Viel stepped forward and touched the obelisk. The chamber changed. It didn't shake, it didn't roar, it stopped. Every sound, every thought, every piece of meaning vanished. Even light felt different. Viel's knees buckled. He collapsed, hands twitching, mechadendrites flailing as if searching for something that wasn't there. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Not a scream, not a breath. Just void. Then a hum began, low and bone deep. I could feel it in my skull. Blood ran from my nose. Juno grabbed Viel and pulled him back, but it was too late. Viel's eyes were open, blinking, but hollow. He was breathing, but no one was there anymore. The preacher knelt beside him and closed his eyes. Then he stood and walked toward the altar. As the preacher approached, the altar began to glow with cold, white light. Each pulse seemed to draw even more sound from the world. Sira raised her flamer. "I don't care what." "It is. I'll burn them all." "No," the preacher said, "and that's what it wants." "What?" "It feeds on your resistance, your fear, your anger. All of it uses words." "If we don't fight," I asked, "what's left?" He looked at me with a soft, sad smile. Silence. The kneeling figures began to move, just slightly. Just enough, like seaweed drifting in still water. Juno tensed. "They're waking up." "No," the preacher whispered. "They never slept." Then, slowly, he reached into his robe and pulled out a tongue, dried, preserved, wrapped in parchment, his own. He laid it on the ground before the altar, then took out a blade. Sira stepped forward. "Stop." But he turned to us and spoke one final time. "I must go where words cannot follow." And then he cut not deep. Just enough to bleed. Blood spilled over the tongue. The altar pulsed once, twice. Then came the worst silence of all. Not just emptiness, erasure. For one brief moment, I forgot everything. My name, my rank, my faith, even the Emperor. And then we were back, still in the chapel, still surrounded. But the preacher was gone. Only his robes remained, folded neatly, and carved into the glowing altar were new words. "The tongue is the first lie. He who offers it is clean. Only one voice may remain." Juno turned to me. His mouth opened. No words came out. But I saw the decision in his eyes, and I wasn't sure what would happen if anyone spoke again. Juno opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked confused, lost. His lips moved again, trying to shape a word, any word, but nothing formed. It wasn't that he didn't want to speak, he just couldn't remember how. His mouth made shapes, like a child learning language for the first time. Sira stepped closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. He flinched, his eyes locked with hers, full of confusion, then fear. I had something to say," he rasped. The sound was brittle, like dead leaves cracking underfoot. A voice that hadn't been used in years. But I lost it. I stepped forward to steady him. Juno leaned into my arm like a drowning man reaching for shore. Around us, the kneeling figures stayed perfectly still. They weren't people anymore. They were examples, warnings, consequences. Viel was lying nearby, breathing, but not responding. His eyes were wide, unmoving, sweat beaded on his brow, though the chamber was ice cold. I knelt beside him and touched his shoulder. "Viel," I whispered, "stay with us. You're still here." His lips didn't move, but his hand rose slowly. One trembling finger traced a shape on my chest plate. Letters. Sira leaned in beside me, watching. "He's writing." Silence. "No," I said. "Look again." I felt the rhythm of the strokes. "Is alive." And then the altar pulsed again. Not with sound, with pressure, a weight behind my ears, a pulse in my jaw, like a silent quake rumbling through. The bones of the world. It wasn't a warning. It was a test, a question without words. Sira raised her flamer. "I'll end this. Now." "No!" Juno rasped, suddenly clear again. "Wait." We both turned to him. Even he looked surprised at his voice. "If we destroy it, we might break the only thing keeping us anchored. This altar, it could be the core, or the key to..." "What?" she snapped. "To letting it out." "No," I said slowly. "It's not the infection. It's the listener." They stared at me. I wasn't sure how I knew, but I did. The altar wasn't broadcasting, it was hearing, and it wasn't finished. We spoke in whispers now, not by choice. Speaking louder felt wrong. Wrong like stepping barefoot into a coffin. Somewhere behind the kneeling congregation, something shifted. A movement, a shape, like a ripple in air with no source. I blinked. Gone. But I felt it. We were no longer being watched from afar, we were being watched from inside. Sira stepped toward the altar and triggered her flamer. A great roar of fire burst forward and twisted in mid-air. The flame bent, curved, turned aside as though pushed away. It didn't touch the altar, didn't want to. It won't burn, Sira said. Her voice cracked with disbelief. It won't let us, I said. The kneeling figures began to sway faster, still not in unison, but now clearly alive. Their stillness had been an act, a lie, and now they were listening again. I turned to the altar, and without thinking, I spoke. Why us? The altar responded, not with sound, but with light. Glowing glyphs slid across its surface like water. You heard it before, you brought it with you. You speak because it allows. My mouth went dry. What do you mean? Heard it before? No answer, just a memory. I was 12, outside the Varnock Hive training grounds, alone. The sky was pale and cold. I had wandered after a broken servo skull, chasing it into an abandoned communications trench. And there, in the still air, I felt it. Not a sound, not a word, a presence, a hush that pressed into me like a hand. I had forgotten it for years, but now it remembered me. It had never left. The altar pulsed again. A single new phrase glowed across its base. Only one voice may remain. Juno stepped beside me, pale. What does that mean? I think, I said up, we're being asked to choose. Choose what? To stop speaking, to surrender. Viel began to spasm. Sira dropped beside him, injecting stims. He gasped once, then spoke, but it wasn't his voice, it was something using his mouth like a shell. The tongue is a parasite. The voice is contagion. Let go and you shall be free. Then Viel's body lurched forward. Black fluid spilled from his mouth. He collapsed. No breath, no pulse, gone. Not killed, just emptied. The last word he whispered wasn't his. It was the altar's. Juno staggered back. We need to leave. We need to blow this place now. No, I said. He turned furious. Why not? I looked around, at Viel's body, at the altar, at my name already carved into the black obelisk before we arrived. Because this isn't starting. It already started. We're not here to stop it. I looked at him. We're here to finish it. Sira rose, shaking. But we still have weapons. We have faith. Juno shook his head. Faith didn't save the preacher. Weapons didn't burn the altar. She stared at me. Then what's left? None of us could answer. Because the silence. It was taking something new now. Choice. It didn't just stop our words. It took away our ability to decide. We stood there, three voices trembling at the edge of stillness, and the altar blinked again. Thigh. Last to speak will witness the end. Sira's eyes widened. She pointed at me. It's you. What? You're the only one left who hasn't given something. Not your voice, not a vow, not a memory. Juno looked at me too. You're the last speaker. And I felt it then. In my teeth, in my skull, in the breath I hadn't yet drawn. The silence was waiting, not to be broken, but to replace me. We fled the chapel. No one gave the order. There was no plan. Just the instinct to move, to get away from that altar and the mouthless congregation, from the pressure that threatened to crush us into silence with every breath. The corridors had changed again, wider, longer, as if the station itself wanted to stretch the time between us and the surface. Each lumen panel we passed flickered with a slow strobe, pulsing in rhythm with the memory of our heartbeat. Not our actual heartbeat, what we remembered of it. I realized with cold clarity that the station wasn't altering reality. It was altering perception. And in that liminal space, somewhere between what was real and what was allowed, it was reshaping us. We stopped in a junction chamber to regroup. VL was dead. The preacher was gone. Rulk had become a vessel. The squad was down to 3, me, Juno, Sira. All 3 of us showed signs of decay, but not physical. We were still healthy, our wounds minor, but inside, I was forgetting details. My homeworld, the color of my mother's hair, my first squad's name, even the Emperor's prayer litany was starting to blur. Sira removed her rebreather and rubbed her temple, panting. I can't hear myself think. You're not supposed to, Juno said. He didn't even look angry anymore, just tired. They want us empty, he continued. Voiceless, faithless, still. I nodded. That's how it wins. We found the first glyph in the corridor leading out of the junction. It wasn't a sign we recognized. It wasn't written in blood, paint, or ash. It was negative space. A symbol of silence burned into the wall by the absence of heat. It looked like a stylized mouth, 3 vertical bars where lips might part, and a downward curve that bent like a crescent blade. Sira called it the sign of stillness. When we looked directly at it, we heard nothing. No air, no gear, no thoughts, only completely void. The moment we looked away, the sensation returned like a slap. It was like the symbol was cutting a hole in space and time. We passed 5 more before. The end of the corridor, each one is slightly different. Each one is closer to perfect. Juno reached out to touch one. I grabbed his wrist. Don't. He blinked, then nodded. But I saw the urge in his eyes. He wanted to feel it, to be inside that silence again. We found a dead-end room at the end of the corridor. It looked like a shrine at first. Old candles, dried blood, devotional symbols to the Emperor. But when we looked closer, we realized they were false. The Aquilas were bent. The parchment blessings had been rewritten. Scripture lines were corrupted, each prayer ending with the same word, repeated. Hush. In the center of the shrine sat a small child-sized chair. On the chair was a Vox recorder. It clicked on by itself and played back my own voice. Don't let them take it. Don't listen. Don't give. Then came Sira's voice. It's inside. Us. It's wearing us. It doesn't kill, it replaces. And finally, Juno's. They're waiting for one of us to open our mouth. The recorder stopped. The candle flames flickered inward for a moment like they were being pulled into something hungry. Juno collapsed. No warning. He just dropped like a sack of gear. I rushed to his side. He was breathing. Barely. His mouth opened. Braced, but nothing came out, only air. His lips moved, but the words were stolen mid-thought. Sira leaned over him, her eyes locked on his. She mouthed, "Name." He blinked once. She said it again. "Say your name." His lips moved. Juno. The chamber rumbled. The Vox recorder sparked, and then he screamed, not aloud, in our heads. One long, primal, soundless scream that tore through thought like fire through parchment. He tasted blood. Sira staggered back. I held him down. When it ended, he passed out. That's when the Vox recorder blinked again. A final message appeared on the screen. One word. Ready. We carried Juno into the maintenance tunnels. Sira found a half-collapsed storeroom and sealed the door with a manual override. Inside, the lights worked. The quiet was less invasive, almost tolerable. But we knew it wouldn't last. We laid him on a stack of canvas wraps and sat in silence. After a few minutes, Sira broke it. Why us? I looked at her. The station was waiting, I said. For voices, for memories, for things to take. "Why this station?" she asked. I shook my head. "I think it's older than the station, older than the cult, older than the silence." She closed her eyes. "Then we're just fuel." "Maybe." A pause. Then she said, "I'm not giving it my name." And I replied, "Neither am I." We wrote our names down that night, on parchment from the corrupted shrine, on the back of a ration packet, on the wall in soot, anywhere we could. Because we knew we wouldn't remember them much longer, not because we were forgetting, because the silence was taking ownership, stealing the parts of us it liked, leaving nothing behind but empty skin. I don't know how long we stayed in that room, but eventually, the Vox recorder played again. We hadn't touched it, hadn't even noticed we brought it with us. But there it was, and it played just one line. Not ours. "Ralks, you can leave, but the quiet will follow." I looked at Sira. She nodded. We knew what had to come next, one last trip to the surface, to broadcast the truth. While we still had voices, we climbed, up broken ladders and rusted stairwells, through access tunnels that stank of ozone and rust, and something older, something that had no scent, yet filled the lungs like dust soaked in memory. The deeper we left the station's lower levels, the more the silence changed. It wasn't oppressive anymore, it was watchful. There's a difference. Oppression smothers, watchfulness waits. It measures. Judges, you could feel it every time a footstep failed to echo, every time your breath came out with no sound, yet still steamed against your visor. The silence was no longer just the absence of noise, it was becoming a terrain. Sira led the way now. Her flamer was strapped to her back, empty. The pilot light flickered with barely a spark, and even that faint warmth seemed to retreat from the walls. Juno was stable, barely. He said little now, but he walked. That alone gave me hope. He'd written his name on the inside of his glove, and every few minutes, he would look at it like it was a lifeline. I copied him. We all did. Black marker on armor. Name, rank, regiment, our last defenses, not against death, against disappearance. The closer we got to the upper decks, the more we realized something horrifying. The walls had changed. They were no longer ferrocrete, no rivets, no piping, no surface. Maintenance codes etched into the metal, just smooth gray-black panels, seamless. And if you touched them, they were warm, soft, and they vibrated. Sira placed her gloved hand against one section and recoiled instantly. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't speak. Just wrote something on her data pad and held it up. It vibrated in rhythm with my heartbeat. We passed a comms node bolted into the ceiling. It looked functional, a miracle. Viel's Auspex might have been able to patch in if he were still alive, but all we had were field tools and what remained of Juno's gear. Sira climbed up to it and unscrewed the panel. Inside, it was full of tongues, dried, stitched together like fiber cables, each one wired into the comms array, pulsating ever so faintly like they were still thinking. Sira backed away and dropped the panel. We didn't try again. We kept moving. The station was leading us now, and we weren't resisting. We wanted to get out, wanted to reach the surface. But deep down, we knew this place had no surface anymore. Not really. The corridors twisted, doubled back, folded like muscle fibers in a jaw about to bite. I swear we passed the same hallway 3 times, and each time, the names written on the walls, our names, were fewer. First, Viel's disappeared, then Ralk's, then Sira's flickered and returned. It was testing her. Juno's name warped into a spiral once. I stared at mine. Still there. Still mine. But I could feel it loosening, like a tooth ready to be pulled. We found a chamber that used to be a medici bay. Now, a chapel, small, dark. The same black sigil is painted above the door in reverse aquila. Inside were dozens of surgical beds arranged like pews, and in each one, strapped down, lay a single body. Mouthless, eyes sealed, hands folded in silent reverence. Not dead. Not living. Stored. Sierra whispered through the vox, voice barely audible. "I think these are the ones who couldn't let go," Juno replied. "Or the ones who were never loud enough to be noticed." I stared at them, all of them breathing in unison, a rhythm of held voices. That's when I realized. The station wasn't suppressing noise, it was absorbing it, harvesting what remained of it, of us. We sealed the chapel. Moved on. One corridor later, the lights went out, not flickered, extinguished. The darkness was sudden, absolute, but not silent. Because in that pitch-black void, we heard the walls breathing. They inhaled with every footstep we made, exhaled when we paused. Juno whispered, "It's alive." "No," I said, "it's becoming." We used the backup lumen strips on our gear, dim red glow rods that painted everything in shadow and rust. And in that bloodlight, we finally saw the truth. The walls had veins, faint, fleshy, webbed through the metal like scar tissue. Some pulsed, some twitched. And then we came to the final hallway. It ended in a heavy blast door. Engraved across its surface was a single symbol, the Eye of Silence, a mouth where the iris should be. The sigil shimmered faintly, as if reacting to our presence. We approached slowly. Weapons are raised out of instinct, not purpose. No one wanted to pull the trigger. No one wanted to become louder than the silence allowed. Sierra found the activation rune. It was warm, pulsing, alive. She looked back at us, then I pressed it. The door hissed, opened, and beyond it, the sky. We stepped outside, and the cold hit us like a blessing. We were on the surface again. The station behind us stood still, silent, half buried in ice and shadow. No storm, no snow, just silence, but a different kind. Not watching, not pressing, just quiet. For the first time in what felt like years, we heard the wind, we heard our own breath. Juno took off his helmet and laughed. It was broken, hollow, but it was sound, real, raw, his. Sierra collapsed to her knees, sobbing. No tears, just dry cries that rasped like dust from a throat too long unused. I stood still, head tilted back, staring at the stars, trying to remember if any of them had ever looked like home. The Vox Tower was still intact, half frozen, blinking weakly, somehow untouched by the madness beneath. I climbed it without thinking, hands numb, heart steady. At the top, I found the Vox controls, ancient but functioning. Sierra's voice buzzed through my microbead. "You going to send a message?" "Yes." "To who?" "Whoever still remembers how to listen." I pressed the transmit rune, took a deep breath and said, "This is Recon Unit Theta 7. Listening post has fallen to a silence-based incursion. The transmission field is alive. It consumes sound, identity, and memory." I paused, searched for the last truth I could give. "Whatever you do." I looked up at the stars again, then finished. "Don't bring your voice here. It's waiting to hear you." I let go of the Vox, and for a moment the wind stopped. The wind returned, sharp, real, comforting even. It howled across the frozen flats of Varnock Prime, kicking up trails of powdered ice around our boots as we stood in silence beneath the blinking Vox Tower. After the pressure and stillness of the station's belly, it felt like standing inside a hymn. Even now, none of us trusted it. The silence was no longer just the space between sounds. It was a predator. It had shape, will, purpose. We waited beside the tower for nearly an hour. watching the stars and the low silhouette of listening post Theta 7 crouched like a forgotten monument. No reply came through the Vox. No message. No fleet. Just wind. Juno sat on a cracked supply crate, helmet off, his eyes squinting toward the icy horizon. "I keep thinking I'll hear my mother's voice again," he said. Voice dry. That's how it started. That's what it showed me. Her voice. Sira didn't reply. I watched her trace her name again on the back of her glove. Her fingers were shaking. Juno nodded toward her. "It's fading, isn't it?" I looked at my own name. Still legible. Still mine. But I didn't remember writing it. Not really, just like I didn't quite remember the sound of my own laugh. Or the way my squad used to chant the litany of purpose. Before deployment, it was all receding, like a tide pulled away before the final wave. "We need a new plan," I said. "Plan for what?" Juno asked. "No reinforcements, no exfil. The Vox is live, but no one's answering. Maybe the message got out. Maybe help's coming. Maybe," Sira said softly. But I could tell she didn't believe it. None of us did. She stood slowly, stretching her legs. Her voice was hoarse from disuse. "There's one place we haven't checked." Juno looked up at her. "You mean down?" She nodded. "The core chapel. The power relay sanctum." My stomach turned. We'd passed that location in the original schematics. It had been locked off, inaccessible, buried beneath collapsed catwalks and sealed hatches. VL had marked it as inert. But VL was gone now, and we were learning quickly that nothing down there was ever inert. We re-entered the station, not because we wanted to, because we had no choice. Something was pulling at us, not through fear, not through threats, through unfinished thoughts. That's how it worked. The silence didn't compel, it invited and left just enough of your own voice intact that you could pretend you were choosing. The upper corridors were different now, twisted. The walls had softened further, no longer metal at all, but something flexible, fibrous. They flexed slightly underfoot. We didn't comment, didn't need to. We descended quickly, bypassing the chapel of the voiceless, bypassing the altar where the preacher vanished, bypassing the blood-lit halls where Ralk's name had once been carved. Each level felt colder, not temperature, emotion. Like the warmth of being human, connection, memory, even anger was being stripped from us, cell by cell. The door to the core chapel wasn't sealed anymore. It had been blown open from the inside. Burn marks ringed the archway. The black sigil had been replaced with a new one, a ring of mouths. Open, endless, devouring each other in an eternal spiral. Beneath it, a phrase burned in hollow script, "Do not say its name." Inside the core chapel, the air was different, warmer, thicker. It felt like being inside a cathedral filled with fog and static, except the fog was made of memory, and the static was your own thoughts playing backward. The walls were lined with mirrors, but none of them showed us. Each one reflected a different version. One showed Sira, kneeling in blood, her lips gone, her eyes empty. Another showed Juno, grinning and mouthless, flanked by hundreds of kneeling converts. The mirror that showed me was cracked, a dozen versions of myself reflected, each with a different expression, all of them screaming, but no sound. At the center of the chapel stood a figure, not alive, not dead. It wore a rotted guard uniform, blank insignia, wires threaded into the skin along its arms and neck. The face was featureless, smooth like a wax sculpture, but breathing, not through a nose. Not through a mouth, just breathing, as if the body had been hollowed out and taught to respire again only by force of will. At its feet was a book. Open, each page is blank, except for one. The name must not be spoken, not because it is powerful, but because it is waiting. Sira approached slowly. She stared down at the featureless figure. It didn't move. She knelt, and for a moment I thought she was surrendering. But then she whispered something into her microbead, a word. So soft, I barely heard it. Emperor. The air shuddered. The figure convulsed once, violently. The mirrors cracked, and the silence screamed, not in sound, in intensity. A wall of psychic pressure knocked us back. Juno fell to his knees, grabbing his head. I bit down until my jaw nearly shattered. Blood streamed from Sira's nose, but she didn't stop. She said it again, louder. Emperor. The figure twisted, turned toward her, but Sira stood and said it one last time. Emperor. The silence broke. Not fully, but enough. I could hear my own heartbeat again. Juno coughed and whispered his name. It sounded real. Sira looked at me, smiled faintly, and collapsed. We carried her out, not back to the surface. Not yet, because something had changed. The chapel's mirrors were gone, the mouth sigils faded, and on the floor, etched into the stone, was a single line of new text. You said his name. Now he listens too. We stayed in the chamber long after Sira collapsed. The silence didn't return completely, not as it had before. The air still felt heavy, but it didn't crush. Our minds didn't vibrate under pressure. The walls no longer pulsed in rhythm with our fears. Something had shifted in the structure of this place, and in us. Sira had said the Emperor's name, and the silence had recoiled. Even now, lying unconscious on a fractured piece of ancient stone, blood drying beneath her nose, Sira looked more alive than we had since landing. Juno sat beside her, watching the dark hallway we'd come from. It didn't scream, he said. No, I replied. It just pulled away, like it didn't want to hear that name. Maybe it can't, I said. Or maybe it's afraid of it. Can a thing like this feel fear? I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure it was a thing anymore. When Sira woke, her first word was my name. That alone made me want to cry. Her voice was raw, thin, but her eyes were focused. She sat up slowly and looked around. I think we have time now, she whispered. It's backing off. Juno helped her up. We go now then, before it regains its strength. I nodded. We returned to the corridor and started toward the surface once more. But we didn't take the same path. The station had changed again. We didn't discuss it. We didn't question the walls shifting like flesh behind metal. We just accepted it. It was guiding us now, not to trap, not to test, to witness. We emerged into a long tunnel leading to an outer airlock. Beyond the bulkhead, through a cracked observation port, we saw snow drifting across Varnok's ice flats. A storm had come, but it wasn't loud. No whirling gales, no shrieking winds, just snow, falling silently like ash from a dying fire. We sealed our visors and pushed through the door into the storm. The air bit at our suits. Visibility was low, but it was real. No hallucinations, no whispers, just cold and snow and space. For the first time in hours, days, I felt my boots crunch into something solid. Juno said nothing, but I knew what he was thinking. We weren't safe, we weren't clear, but we were outside the silence's walls. We marched across the flats in single file, heading for a relay beacon that had been decommissioned months before. Sira claimed she could power it up with what was left of her gear. If we were lucky, the high-altitude reach would catch a Navy patrol circuit. That's when the snow began to change. It stopped falling straight. Instead, it began to spiral. Small, delicate flurries twisting mid-air. Juno was the first to notice. This isn't wind. Sira wiped frost from her visor. It's forming patterns. I looked up and froze. There, Above us in the drifting snow, symbols began to take shape. Spirals, mouths, eyelets, lines of script, written in falling snowflakes. We all stopped. The wind whispered across our armor, but we didn't feel cold anymore, only watched. I reached out and caught a snowflake on my glove. It didn't melt. It lingered for several seconds, then vanished. But before it disappeared, I saw a word etched into its crystalline form. Listen. Syrah's breath caught. We didn't leave it behind. Juno's knuckles whitened around his rifle. It followed us? No, I said slowly. It was already out here. The wind stopped, not died down, stopped utterly, as if someone had muted the atmosphere. No pressure, no sound, no drift, and then the snow began to fall upward. I turned slowly. The path we'd walked across the flats had vanished. Not buried, gone. No footprints, no trail. The ice looked untouched, as if we had never passed through. Syrah pointed to the horizon. Shapes were moving. In the storm, tall, thin, not shadows, not illusions. They stood like statues, mouthless, watching. One raised a hand, and the snow between us carved a line in the ice, writing a message in one continuous stroke. Your words are leaving you, Juno raised his rifle. The figures didn't move. Syrah stepped in front of him. No, not yet. We can't fight this, I said. Juno stared ahead, jaw clenched. I know, he whispered, and then he lowered his weapon. We backed away slowly, keeping the storm wall in view. The relay tower's silhouette appeared in the distance, its structure wrapped in cables of ice and rust. Somewhere inside was the last chance to call for help. If help still existed, if we still remember how to ask. As we walked, the snow began to sing again. Not music, not voices, just intent. Not in our ears, in our thoughts. You made it far. You still speak. That will end soon. We reached the base of the relay tower just as the snow cleared for a moment. Inside, darkness waited, but not like before. This was a dead structure, no movement, no breath. Syrah stepped forward and powered. Up the interface, the screen flickered, prompted for access. Juno handed her a plug-in from VL's salvaged gear, a jury-rigged code spike. Syrah hesitated, then looked at us. If we call for help and someone comes, I nodded. We bring it to them. If we stay quiet, she continued, we give it us. There was no right answer, only what was left. She activated the spike. The console blinked, signal acquired, speak now. She turned to me, it wants your voice. I opened my mouth, paused, then said, this is recon unit Theta 7. Listening post has been compromised by the non-chaotic silence. Phenomenon, psychic, infectious, do not approach. Destroy the station from orbit. Do not answer. Do not reply. Do not speak back. Just... I paused. The snow resumed falling, only downward. Just forget it. The tower shuddered. The figures in the distance turned and faded back into the storm. Juno looked at me. You think it heard you? I shook my head. No, I think it listened. The relay tower powered down after the message. No prompt, no signal confirmation, just a soft click, and then darkness. Syrah tried to reinitialize the console, but it was dead. No spark, no hum, not even residual heat from the terminal's core. It was like the machine had never been alive to begin with. Juno stepped away from the console and stood at the edge of the tower's open threshold, staring out into the windless snow. The storm was still, yet the horizon moved, undulating with silent shapes. The Watchers. I didn't join him. I was staring at my own hands because I couldn't remember which one I used to write with. We took shelter beneath the tower's support frame, setting up what remained of our field gear. Sierra rigged a proximity warning system using microbeads and stripped Vox channels from the beacon. It wouldn't hold against anything physical, but that wasn't what we were worried about. We didn't need walls anymore. We needed anchors, anything, to keep the silence from peeling our thoughts open like old scripture. Sierra lit a stub of the paper and passed it to me. I held it, unlit, staring into the coil of smoke rising from her lips. "That's not standard issue," I muttered. She gave me a wry smile. I smuggled it in with my field rations. A beat passed, then I asked, "What were you before this?" She looked away. "I don't remember." Neither did I. Juno wandered during the third hour. He didn't say he was going. We just turned around and saw his pack sitting neatly folded beside the Vox casing. Sierra swore and scanned the horizon with her scope. "I've got a faint trail, northwest. He's walking alone." We followed. The snow softened as we approached him. Juno stood perfectly still in the center of a shallow valley, arms limp at his sides, face tilted to the blank sky. He didn't acknowledge our presence. Even when Sierra shouted his name, he just stood there, lips parted, eyes blank. I reached him first and gently turned him by the shoulder. He looked at me, then past me. "Who are you?" he asked. Sierra froze. "What?" He looked at her, confused, genuinely puzzled. I don't know you. Are you with the others?" "What others, Juno?" I asked quietly. His eyes narrowed. "That's not my name." Sierra stepped forward, voice calm. "Yes, it is Juno Carr, Varnock Recon 86th, you were squad medic." "No," he said. "No, I'm a sanitation worker. I clean..." He paused. The snow around his boots began to recede, melting in an outward ring. He looked down, stumbled back. "I don't remember my hands," he whispered. "Why don't they look right?" Then he screamed. No sound came out. We got him back under the tower. He thrashed the whole way, muttering about lost days and wrong faces and who built this name into me. Sierra injected him with a neural stabilizer. It helped, for a little while. Juno sat against the wall, drawing something on the snow-dusted metal floor with his fingers, repeating the same pattern. A mouth. 3 vertical lines inside a circle. Every so often he'd mutter, "Don't forget what they took." That was when the scratching began. Not footsteps, not whispering. Scratching, a soft, dragging scrape around the tower's supports. We aimed our rifles through the slats, but there was nothing outside. No wind, no movement. Then Sierra pointed. There. Far. In the distance, a figure walking upright, but gliding slightly, wearing a guard's coat, arms stretched to the sides, mouth glowing with internal light. "Is that..." I began. Sierra shook her head. "No. It's what's left." The figure raised its hand. We heard nothing, but our gear crackled. Juno hissed in pain, clutching his ears. Then it spoke, in all of our voices at once. "Come back inside. We are quieter now. We remember for you." Juno began to sob, clutching his knees. Sierra aimed her rifle. "Do we shoot?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure it would matter anymore. The figure vanished into the snow. Juno passed out, and we sat, sleepless, until the stars reappeared overhead. The snow never stopped. But now, each flake carried a weight, an echo. Not sound, but thought. Old memories, lost truths. I saw a training field I hadn't stood on since I was 14. A woman's hand in mine, face forgotten. Chapel bell on a world that had burned a decade ago. None of it was mine. Not anymore. Sierra whispered beside me. "I don't think we're dreaming this." "We're not." "Then why does it feel like a memory?" I looked at her and said the only thing I could. "Because it is. Just not ours." The tower's Vox sparked once more, one last signal. Shortwave, encrypted, then a voice. No call sign, Just words, spoken with a hollow calm. We are the cult that worshipped silence. We do not speak its name. We do not fear it. We become it. When you forget who you are, you will finally hear what it has always been saying. We buried Juno beneath the ice, not because he was dead, but because what was left of him was no longer Juno. He slept with his eyes open. His breath was shallow, and every few minutes he whispered something that wasn't a language. Not low Gothic, not binary, not demonic. It was subtracted speech, words with the middle pulled out, like prayers where the names had been erased. We laid him under a fractured satellite dish beside the relay tower, wrapped in synth cloth, bound by faded regiment. Strips, Syrah whispered the rite of passing. I didn't join her, because the silence was listening again, and I didn't want it to learn his name a second time. That night, the snow stopped. Not slowed, stopped. The sky above cleared into a pale aurora, gray and violet streams rolling across the blackness like ink bleeding through parchment. We sat under the tower's broken ribs, watching the lights. Syrah passed me a ration bar. I took it and unwrapped it slowly. Neither of us spoke. There was a kind of reverence in that stillness, not enforced, not infected, just ours. A hush of survival, one that hadn't yet been corrupted. But it wouldn't last. We found the diary the next morning, buried under the relay tower's old Vox Pulse matrix, wedged into a sealed compartment behind a rusted panel. Its cover was made of cloth, soft, scorched, half-torn. Inside were handwritten entries. The first dozen were crisp, structured dates, times, atmospheric readings, comms updates. Then the sentences began to break. Grammar failed, words repeated. One entry read, "We saw it again in the airlock glass. No reflection, just mouth, always mouth." Another, "Our prayers stopped sounding like prayers, just echoes, like we were repeating something we never said." The final entry was only 3 words, written in a jagged scrawl that covered an entire page. "Forget to remember." Syrah traced her glove along the page. I think this was the Medicae's journal, the one we found stitched shut. I asked. She nodded. I remember his eyes. "Yeah," I whispered. "Me too." There were diagrams tucked into the back of the book, hand-sketched spirals, the same symbol we'd seen etched on walls and flesh, the mouth with no throat. A series of accompanying notes tried to analyze it. Symbol may not represent entity, could be a method. Language is architecture. Speaking breaks the symmetry. Silence is construction. Noise is entropy. Syrah turned the page and found one final phrase written vertically down the margin. She showed it to me. "It is not what silence removes. It is what it leaves behind." We packed the diary carefully. No fire would destroy it. Not anymore. We didn't talk about what that meant because we both understood this was our scripture now, unwanted, unreadable. But ours. We heard the voice again just before sundown. It wasn't on Vox. It was in the snow. The flakes carried a pulse, not sound, but an invitation. And from somewhere in the blank distance, a whisper rose like a wind through glass. "You are ready. Come below. Let us finish forgetting." Syrah stood. She looked at me. "I'm not going." I shook my head. "I know, but you are." She handed me her name, written on the inside of her helmet in permanent ink, folded it, placed it in my hand. "If I disappear," she said, "don't forget I gave it willingly." "I won't forget you," I told her. She smiled, and for the first time in days it didn't look like a mask. "Good," she said. "Then that's something it can't take." I walked alone, toward the edge of the flats, back to the buried station. Not because I believed I could win, not because I had a plan, but because the silence wanted me back, and I had to know why. The mouth-shaped sigils had returned across the entrance, painted in frost, mouths that did not open, mouths that did not scream. Stepped over them, entered the station, down, back through corridors that felt warmer than I remembered, back through walls that pulsed with a hum too low for ears. I reached the chapel at the core. It had changed, widened. The kneeling figures were gone. The altar had expanded into a throne of tongues and parchment, and on it sat a figure in my own armor, same face, same scars, eyes blank, mouth closed. It stood, walked toward me, and whispered, "I am your silence." I did not answer. I knelt, reached into my coat, unfolded Sira's name, held it up like a shield. The silence flinched, ever so slightly. Then it leaned close, and for the first time I heard its true voice. It did not command. It did not scream. It asked me only one question: "Will you give yourself willingly?" And I said no. The altar cracked. The walls howled, not in sound, in defeat. The station began to unravel. I turned, ran. As the corridors bent and twisted behind me, folding into one another like pages in a book being closed, snow poured through the collapsing airlocks. Tithe. Wind roared through the bowels of the world. The silence screamed, not as a noise, but as absence, and then only cold, only wind, only me. I reached the surface again. The tower was gone. The lights were gone. Sira was gone. Only her name remained, carved into the snow, untouched, unfaded, still hers. I picked it up, held it close, and knew I still had one voice left. I wandered the ice flats for what felt like hours, maybe days. Time didn't work right anymore. The sun never moved. The shadows never changed. Even my own breath no longer fogged the inside of my visor, and I wasn't sure I was still breathing. But I clutched the name, Sira's name, folded, faded, pressed into my palm like a relic from a forgotten saint. It was the last piece of her. Of any of us. The silence hadn't taken it. Couldn't. Because it was given, and that's what made the difference. I found an outcrop of ice glass jutting from the edge of a cliff. From there, I could see the crater where the listening post used to be. There was nothing left, no smoke, no debris, just a smooth hollow in the earth. Like something vast had risen from below and taken the station with it, then wiped the memory clean. The snow no longer fell there. Even the storm had learned to avoid that place. And above it, hung in the sky like an eye without a pupil, was a shape. Black. Silent. A ring of mouths, moving slowly, like it was breathing. I sat at the edge of the cliff, opened the name again, read it, letter by letter, Sira Evante. Varnock Recon 86th, braver than me, stronger. I whispered it aloud, not as a prayer, not as defiance, just because I could. The wind didn't take it, the silence didn't steal it. And in that moment, I understood something. The silence wasn't invincible. It could consume noise, it could erase language, it could devour history, but it could not steal what was willingly remembered. That's when I heard the boots behind me. Soft, measured. I didn't turn. I knew who it would be. "Are you going to try again?" I asked. No answer, just breathing. I turned slowly. It was me again, the same mirrored face I'd seen in the station. But this time, the armor was cracked, the eyes flickering, the mouth is slightly open, no sound came out, but the meaning still pressed into my skull. "You brought it this far. You taught it more than sound. You gave it self. Now give it a name." I stood, stared at the reflection of myself, then whispered, "No." It tilted its head. "You will become me, sooner or later. The last voice always does." "Maybe," I said, "but not today." I stepped forward, held out Sira's name. "This is why." The thing in my image took it, looked at it, and for a heartbeat, I saw pain in its eyes. Not anger, not fear, just something like loss. Then it faded. No scream, no burst of light, just gone. The wind returned a second later, for the first time in days. It howled. I kept walking, didn't know where I was going, didn't care. The sky above me had gone pale. The stars no longer stared. The black ring had vanished in its place. Silence, but not the kind that devoured, not the kind that listened, just the old kind, the kind that lives between words, that waits beneath breath, the kind we're born with, before the world teaches us language. Walked until I saw the lights, faint, blinking, distant, a beacon, not imperial, civilian, mining rig, automated. I approached slowly, half afraid I'd imagined it, but the door opened. Warmth touched my face for the first time in forever. A voice crackled. Through the Vox, unknown signal, please identify. I smiled, and for the first time, I spoke a new sentence. My name is Varn Aelric, Guardsman, survivor of listening post Theta 7. A pause. You're not on the records. No, I said. We don't have a match for your designation. I nodded. I know. Another pause, requesting code word confirmation. I hesitated, then whispered, Sierra. The console went quiet. Then, confirmed. Welcome home. I don't remember the shuttle. Don't remember the flight. But I remember. The stars, they looked different, less sharp, less distant, like they'd been muffled. I slept most of the way and dreamed of names. Thousands of them. None of them are mine. They called it a psychogenic episode, said I'd wandered off course during a routine comms check. No signs of warp interference, no confirmed contacts. Just frostbite and hallucinations. My report was filed, buried, erased, my squad marked MIA. The station was marked destroyed by a geothermal fault. That's the version you'll read. The one approved for records, the one they remember. But I kept one, thing they couldn't take, her name. And the truth, there's a sound deeper than screaming, a silence that doesn't come from peace, but from hunger. And somewhere, far from where the stars still shine, it is still listening. They reassigned me to a hospice vessel, quiet work, off the books, far from the front lines. I was never debriefed by naval intelligence, never questioned by inquisitors, no mind scrub, no interrogation. I think they already knew what I'd touched, and they were afraid of what I might still remember. The medical staff called it trauma-induced memory disorder. Chronic internalized silence response, they said. A new designation for a wound that doesn't bleed. I didn't argue. What could I say? How do you explain that something alive lives in the spaces between words, that it waits in our pauses, that it grows in our prayers when they go unanswered? The room they gave me was small, clean, white walls, no decor, a single terminal on the desk. Used it to write. Not a report, a record, not for command, not for the scholar or the munitorum or even the ecclesiarchy, just for me, and for anyone who might one day hear the silence I survived. I wrote their names again. Sira Ivanti, Drenvalin Magos, Vieljuno Kar Ralk, Jorvin. The preacher I underlined each one, and next to them, I wrote what they gave. Sira, voice, Dren, doubt, Viel, understanding, Juno, memory, Ralk, himself, the preacher, faith. I left mine blank, because I'm not sure what I gave, only that I left with less. The nightmares still come, not of blood, not of death, just quiet, waking to nothing, opening my mouth to speak and hearing only others. My own voice repeating words I never said, in rooms I never entered. I sleep with white noise now. A small broken Vox unit on the nightstand plays static loops of old imperial sermons. Hymns I no longer believe in, but whose sound reminds me that silence is not victory, just delay. 1. Night. The vox cut out. The unit stuttered, buzzed, then went dead. I sat up instantly, sweat cold on my back. The silence was so absolute it felt like being underwater. Then, the vox clicked once, and a voice came through. A voice I knew. So long. As one voice resists the silence is not yet God. I froze. That was my line, from my log. I never broadcast it, I never wrote it down, I only thought it. And it had come back. I left the hospice the next day. No discharge papers, no notice. I just walked out, into the stars, into the places where no one speaks, where the administratum forgets to assign names, where systems go uncharted. I'm not hiding, I'm not running, I'm watching, because it's still out there, not angry, not vengeful, just patient, like snowfall, like prayer left too long unanswered. Found another listening post, derelict, abandoned, no crew, no vox logs. But I found a symbol on the wall. 3 vertical lines, bent into a downward mouth, and I knew. It had reached here too, so I keep writing, keep recording. Because the moment I stop, the moment I let go of the noise, that's when it wins. That's when it steps forward. That's when it names me back. If you're hearing this, if you're reading this, if you've ever heard something in a quiet room where no one else was, where you swore you heard your own voice, saying something you never meant, you've already been marked. But you still have time. Speak, even if it's to yourself, even if no one hears. Because the moment you go quiet, the moment you surrender your last syllable, it comes. And then no one speaks again. The ship that found me was a long-range salvage hauler, Magna Vitae, registered out of Lorne Secundus. Civilian crew, no military clearance. They picked me up 3 days out from the hospice vessel, found me drifting near the orbit of a dead moon, sealed in a pressure suit, unconscious. I don't remember how I got there. They said I was muttering when they brought me aboard, not screaming, not praying, just repeating a phrase. The silence forgets, but not fast enough. I don't remember saying that either. The Magna Vitae crew was kind, too kind. They gave me a bunk near the med bay, warm food and filtered air. Let me keep to myself, asked no questions. Probably figured I was ex-guard like most of the drift wreck survivors they picked up. They called me the Ghost. And when I tried to remember my real name, I couldn't say it, not aloud, only hear it in my thoughts, as if the silence had stitched it shut in my throat. The ship ran deep salvage in backwater systems, empty stations, wrecked listening posts, forgotten mining satellites. I told myself I'd lay low, just pass through, fade into the stars. But fate doesn't forget. Not when you've seen what I've seen. Not when it has seen you. 3 days into the voyage, we docked with a derelict comms relay in the Holtros belt. The station had gone silent 22 years ago. No distress beacon, no damage reports, just nothing. The crew said it was a routine job. Sweep the databanks, scavenge tech, search for survivors. None expected any. But I knew. Before we even breached the airlock, I knew. It was waiting inside. The moment we crossed the threshold, I felt it, like a vibration in my teeth, like breath held too long, like being watched by your own reflection. The lights flickered, but the systems were still functional. That was worse. Dead stations shouldn't feel awake. Crewman Dallow was the first to hear it. We were moving through the central command shaft when he stopped cold and looked around. "Did you hear that?" he asked. No one else had. He swore he heard someone calling his name, softly, lovingly, like someone who missed him. He laughed it off, nervous, joked about ghosts. But I'd seen that expression before. Second was Prin. She found a bulkhead etched with strange symbols. Not Gothic. Not any known dialect, but I recognized them. 3 vertical bars. a downward crescent. The mouth. She took a picture of it, and then she started humming. Not a song. Not anything she'd ever heard before. Just a soundless hum. One that somehow echoed, even. When she stopped, I tried to warn them, told them to turn back. Said this wasn't salvage. That this station wasn't empty, it was occupied. They laughed, even thanked me. First real story we've had in months, Dallo said. Maybe there's a payout in haunting rights, Prin joked. I didn't laugh, I just stared at the wall, where the sigil pulsed under red emergency lights. It wasn't painted, it was grown. They ignored me, so I went back to the airlock, waited, watched, and prayed. Not to the Emperor. He hadn't answered before. I prayed to memory that mine would last long enough to survive again. Then, the lights on the station died, one by one. Like eyelids closing, the Vox went first, then the internal sensors, then the gravity. Heard Dallo scream once, then nothing, a silence too perfect to be natural. I opened the airlock, flooded it with radiation, scrambled the docking protocols, cut the tethers, the ship lurched, tried to override. I shut it all down and jettisoned the port. They never made it back. None of them. I told the nav system to forget the station's location, to purge it, to erase the beacon, but I know it's still there, and so am I, because even though I escaped, I'm still listening. Every static burst on the Vox, every flicker of light in the corner of my eye, every quiet moment before sleep, it's there, waiting. Not with teeth, not with claws, with understanding. The kind that doesn't need to kill, because it can make you erase yourself. Write this log in the captain's quarters. No crew left, no records, just the hum of a ship coasting on inertia and ghosts. The only thing I remember clearly now, the only thing, is her name, Sira. Her name is the last sound I'll ever let this universe have, because when it takes me, when it asks for mine, I'll stay quiet, not in surrender but in resistance. The Magna Vitae is empty now, drifting through dead systems with no known designation, too far for patrols, too far for prayers. It hums with residual power. The machine spirit's voice has grown faint. The lights pulse like a fading heartbeat. Walk the halls alone, not searching, just listening. I carry a journal now. A thick, leather-bound tome that once belonged to a mining priest we rescued from a collapsed habdome. He died 2 hours later without ever speaking. His mouth had been stitched shut from the inside. I never learned his name, but I write mine every morning on the first page over and over again, because the moment I stop, that's when I start forgetting. The ship's Auspex logs show something strange. Every 7th cycle, the Vox array activates on its own. No crew, no command, just transmits. No destination logged, no signal strength report. But the transmissions are real. I listened once. Only once. It played back my own voice, but not a recording. It was me, telling myself things I never said. They're inside your memories now. Don't write your name. The last silence will be God. I ripped the Vox out of the console and dumped it into the recycler. Didn't help. The voice still comes back. Now it doesn't use speakers, it just speaks from the walls. I tried to kill the ship once. Routed power through the reactor vents and tried to cook the machine spirit. Override the drives. Trigger a self-destruct. It stopped me. Before the command could finish, the terminal locked. Not with standard protocols. With words. We still remember you. Why don't you want to stay? This is the place where no one says goodbye. I started finding letters around the ship, scratched into the steel, ink on discarded data slates. Words are written in the condensation of the food processor panel. Sometimes just a single name, sometimes whole sentences. We never left. Do you remember who gave you your first name? There is a silence older than stars. I don't sleep much now. When I do, I dream of a city with no voices, not a nightmare, not terror, just endless corridors where people walk but never speak. They greet each other with nods and blank expressions. All of them wear their names on slips of paper pinned to their chest, but none of them can read. Once, I saw Sira in the dream. She was kneeling at the edge of a fountain. No water, just silence pouring upward. I asked her what it meant. She turned to me. Her mouth was open, but inside was a spiral. I woke with blood on my hands. The name in my journal was smeared, half erased. Only Ael remained. Not enough. I rewrote it, forced each stroke of ink with deliberate pressure, as if carving memory into reality. Because it matters, even now, especially now. The ship took me back. I don't remember the jump, but I woke with Varnok's pale sun rising over a field of black ice, the crater still there, the snow still swirling. No listening post, just a hole, waiting. I walked for hours, didn't eat, didn't drink, just followed the pressure. That pull. Like a name you hear in the dark and don't know why it sounds familiar. At the center of the crater stood a figure. Tall, thin, wearing my old armor. Back turned. I didn't speak, didn't need to. It turned, and it was me. But cleaner, untouched, still wearing a name. My first name, the one I stopped using after the war. It smiled, held out a hand, palm open. Inside was a folded slip of paper. I took it, unfolded it, and saw 2 words written in perfect script. Speak it. I shook my head. No, its mouth didn't move, but I heard it anyway. You have to let go and be finished. Let go and the hunger ends. Let go and the voice fades forever. I knelt in the snow and whispered her name. Sira. Not mine, hers, because even if I vanished, if the silence finally took me, she would remain. That name, that sound, that defiance. The figure before me flickered, cracked, and collapsed, not in violence, but in quiet. The kind of silence that means something is lost, not something gained. I stood alone again, the sky above like old parchment, stars blinking like forgotten thoughts, and I said my name aloud, Varn Aelric. No echo, but no devouring either. The silence didn't win, not yet, because I spoke. First, I left Varnok's surface at sunrise, if it was sunrise. The planet's rotation had slowed since my last visit. Time moved like oil. The star above glowed red and distant, giving barely enough light to see by. Shadows fell long and thin across the black ice, like they were stretched by some unseen force. There were no ships, no crew, just the Magna Vitae waiting for me in orbit. I don't remember how I returned aboard. The memory ends at the edge of the crater and begins again in the pilot's seat. My fingers were cold. My name was scratched into the dashboard in jagged lines. Varn Aelric, again and again and again. The engines hummed with a frequency that didn't match standard calibration. It sang softly in the spaces between pulses, a sound too quiet to record, but too present to ignore. Not music, not noise, a reminder that I wasn't alone, that the silence still knew me. I tried to chart a course back to Segmentum Solar, but the nav systems didn't recognize the stars anymore. Every time I aligned the coordinates, the constellations changed, flickered, shifted, like the stars themselves were blinking, watching. The silence hadn't just followed me off-world, it had rewritten the map. In desperation, I reached for the emergency Vox beacon, shortwave, hard-coded, designed for one thing only, a direct distress call to Terra. I input the override sequence, forced a signal through. The console buzzed, then clicked. Transmission received. Stand by for a response. I waited. 20 seconds. Then the reply came. Aelric, we heard you. You were never meant to leave. Return. Remember. Remove. I shut the Vox down before it finished. The words had no source, no frequency origin, just echoes, but not the ones I'd sent. Ones that pre-existed me. That night, I dreamed of names being pulled apart like spider silk. Each thread is a syllable. Each syllable is a scream without breath. And in the center of it all, a face with no mouth, just a page of scripture stretched over bone, with only 2 words written across it, "Be still." I awoke gasping. My name was gone from the console, erased. Only she remained. Sira, etched deep into the nav pad, unscathed. I whispered it like a benediction, and for a moment, the ship's hum slowed, its pitch corrected. The stars outside stopped flickering. She was still protecting me, even now, even from within the silence. I set the engines for drift. No jump, no destination, just movement. I didn't trust the warp anymore, didn't trust the stars, didn't even trust myself. But I knew this. If I stood still, it would take me again, not with violence, with quiet certainty. So I moved. I found another station a week later, uncharted, barely alive. One flickering beacon, no designation, no name. The log showed 1 occupant, just 1. Curious, I opened a hail. The reply came instantly. "I've been waiting, Varn." The voice wasn't synthetic. It wasn't human. It was familiar, like mine, but spoken from a version of myself I almost became. I docked. Stepped inside. The station was clean, too clean, sanitized, polished and prepared. Lights hummed in perfect cadence. A single corridor led from the airlock to the central chamber. There was no crew, only 1 chair, facing away, and in it, a figure wearing my armor, older, worn, voice calm. "Sit." I didn't. Raised my last pistol. He didn't flinch. "You won't kill what you still might become. You came because the silence is patient. You came because it's already inside." I said nothing, just listened, because deep down I knew what he was. Not my shadow, not a twin, a future. He pointed to the console. "Play the tape." I approached, pressed the rune. The recording played. My voice. But not a log I remembered making. I am the echo of names lost to time. I am the last sound before the hush. And I remember everything you tried to forget. The screen showed a location, a ship graveyard near the edge of the segmentum obscurus. Coordinates burned into the metal. I looked back at him. He was gone. The chair was empty. No heat, no shadow, no trace, only the whisper of my name from behind the walls. Varn. I returned to the Magna Vitae, locked the airlock, deleted the coordinates, scrubbed the log. But I couldn't erase the feeling, the certainty that I would end up there, eventually. Because the silence wasn't a place. It wasn't even a creature. It was a path. One walked by all who listened too long. I'm still writing, every day, every cycle, even when my hand shakes, even when my thoughts fray. Because every word is a defiance, every sentence is a tether, and every time I finish a page I whisper Sira's name aloud, because as long as I speak her name, the silence can't erase me. Not yet. There's a saying I once heard whispered in a guard trench on Kolvar Prime. The Emperor protects, but the stars remember. Back then, I thought it was just superstition, a way to make sense of the warp ghosts and astropathic echoes we sometimes heard during the quiet hours between bombardments. But now I understand. The stars do remember, and some things they wish they didn't. I drifted past the segmentum's edge last week, far beyond any charted trade route. No beacon, no astropath. Tether. Just darkness pierced by pale light and cold stars. The Magna Vitae ran low on fuel. The engines began to sputter, the reactor heart giving off irregular pulses. I thought the ship would finally die. But then, it sang. Only once, a clear tone. Low and resonant. So deep it bypassed sound and vibrated in my spine. I checked the auspex. Nothing. Logged, no energy spike, no known signal. But the ship changed course, on its own, towards something. It took 3 days before I saw it, a mass in the void. Blacker than shadow. Geometries that didn't align, like a cathedral folded in on itself. It wasn't a structure. It wasn't a ship. It was a memory-given shape. I didn't need to hail it, didn't need to dock, because as I approached, the Magna Vitae powered down, lights, systems, navcomp, all of it. Shut off like a candle snuffed in a vacuum, but I was still moving, still being drawn in. Not by gravity, by recognition. It remembered me, and I remembered it. Inside was not darkness. It was reflection, not mirrors, memories. Every surface showed something I had tried to forget. The Vox station where Juno lost his voice. The chapel where the preacher gave his tongue. The ritual chamber where we found the first altar. And there, in the center of it all, her, Syrah, but not alive, not dead, just still, as if frozen between seconds, her mouth open in mid-sentence, eyes half blinking, a name written on her chest in red ash, the one who spoke. I dropped to my knees, reached for her, but my hands passed through her like smoke. She wasn't there, not really, just an echo. The silence's way of reminding me what I'd lost, what I might still give. Then the voice came, not hers, not mine, ours. There is no forgetting what never finished speaking. You carried her, so now we carry you. We are not one mind. We are all minds that gave up their voice. I stood, shaking. No, I said, you're not many. You're one thing, hollow. It didn't argue. The walls pulsed. And for the first time, I heard it. The true shape of the silence. It wasn't just quiet. It wasn't just absence. It was a tomb built from erased names. Turned to run, but the station changed. Walls rotated, gravity tilted, the corridors became lungs, the air thickened into meaning. I couldn't breathe, not with lungs, with memory, and it was taking that too. Then, I remembered something Syrah said once, long ago before everything broke. Don't try to fight it with weapons, fight it with noise. I reached for my throat. Opened the emergency Vox collar, triggered the override. A burst of static filled the space around me. It shouldn't have worked. There was no real air, no pressure. But the signal echoed, and the silence screamed, not in pain. In surprise, like a wound that didn't know it could still bleed. The room cracked, the walls split into streams of memory and shadow, and I was falling through every version of myself. I never became the priest, the heretic, the mute, the thing that knelt before the spiral, but I landed on one truth. I am Varn Aelric. I am the last to speak, and I will speak until the end. When I woke, I was back on the Magna Vitae, lights flickering, Vox silent. Navcomp reinitialized, no sign of the Black Station, no course history, just a blinking log update. One file was added, time-stamped. At the exact moment I passed out, Philiname Syrah last Vox I played it. Her voice, real, whole. If you're hearing this, you found where I left myself. You remembered. That means the silence didn't win. Good. Keep going. Don't stop. Talking, don't stop being, and Varn, a pause. One I will never forget. You're not alone. I wept for the first time in years, not because I was afraid, but because I knew, even in the dark, she had found a way to echo, to speak after the end. That's what the silence never understood. Speech isn't just noise, it's resistance. I plotted a new course where doesn't matter, as long as I keep speaking, as long as I keep carrying names, because when the last name is spoken, the silence ends, not with a scream, but with a whisper that says, I remember. The stars changed again last night. I swear they rearranged themselves while I slept. Constellations I've known since my Schola Progenium days blinked out, shifted position, and rewrote their shapes like glyphs on a living codex. Now, when I look out from the observation deck, I see only patterns, spirals, mouths, symbols that don't belong in real space. They're not guiding me, they're warning me, but the direction's the same. The signal I didn't send is still pulling me forward. Plays through the ship's bones, not through Vox channels, but through the vibration in walls and air and breath, not noise, invitation. I spend my days writing, ink on steel, char and soot when pens run out. Every surface of the Magna Vitae is a ledger now, corridor panels, bulkhead struts, ration tins. Even the back of my hands, names and thoughts, bits of truth, shards of identity. Because the only way to stay real is to leave evidence. Even if the silence takes my voice, it can't erase my mark unless I give it willingly. And I won't. Not again. I pass the mirror in the crew quarters often now. It's old, cracked. Shard of polished metal framed in dented brass. For a long time it didn't show anything. No reflection, just a dull shimmer, like fog trapped behind glass. But today, it changed. I saw something, not me, almost me, standing behind me, smiling, mouth sewn shut with golden thread. It tilted its head as I stared, then mouthed a phrase, not aloud, not audible, but I felt it. Say your name. I didn't. I turned and walked away because I knew if I answered, it would become me. I sealed the mirror behind a blast door, wrote, "Do not trust what looks back," in black ink across the entrance, but I still feel it watching through the walls. Not the mirror, what's inside it. The thing wearing my shape, the reflection that never blinks. 3 days later, the Vox crackled again. No input, no hail, just breathing, shallow, raspy, human. I should have shut it off. Instead, I listened. It spoke in a dozen voices, all familiar, all mine, not mimicry, recordings, my own past played back like confessions. They died because I hesitated. I should have stayed silent. Maybe the silence was right. Each voice was older, weaker, until the final one whispered, "We end when we forget what we refuse to say." I screamed, tore the Vox out of the console, smashed it with my boot. Didn't help. The whisper moved into the vents, into the lights, into my dreams. The next morning, I found words carved into my forearm, not deep, but fresh. I didn't make them, didn't feel the cut. But there they were. You're already inside. I don't sleep anymore. I sit with the lights on, back to the wall, journaling everything, even the parts I want to forget. Because I've learned something about the silence. It doesn't consume you like fire. It convinces you to hand yourself over. 1. Word at a time. Sierra's name is still clear, written on the last page of my final notebook. I read it aloud every night, the moment I stop. That's when she disappears. Not her body, not her soul, just the memory that she ever spoke. And if that goes, so do I. Today, I found another mirror. I didn't bring it aboard, didn't install it. It was just there. Perfect glass, polished, no frame, set into the corridor wall like it had always belonged. I stared into it and saw nothing, no reflection, just silence, like the mirror was holding its breath, waiting. Then, a crack formed across the surface, slow, jagged, deliberate, and in it, my voice whispered back, "We are almost one." I ran, slammed the emergency lockdown seals on that deck, welded them shut. It won't hold, not forever, because this isn't a ship anymore, it's a memory engine, and it's learning how to remember for me. There's one thing it doesn't understand, though. A name spoken in love can't be unspoken. It can be buried, blurred, Forgotten for a time, but not unmade. Not truly. So I've begun saying them again. All of them. Ralk, Viel, Juno, the preacher, Sierra, even mine. Even the ones I think I misremember. Because, even if I get them wrong, they're louder than the quiet. The reflection hasn't moved again. Not yet. But I know what it's waiting for. The same thing the silence always waits for. The moment you believe you're alone, that's when it moves. That's when it replaces. That's when you stop being you. So I speak, even now, to empty rooms, to dark corners, to the still air that vibrates when I say something real. And I end every sentence the same way. A phrase that used to be meaningless, but now holds everything I remember. The ship made orbit above a dead world last night. I didn't tell it to. The nav logs were blank. No planetary designation. No star charts to match. No warp jump coordinates logged. It was just there, floating beneath the hull like it had always been waiting for me. Gray surface. No oceans. No atmosphere. But the land pulsed like breath beneath skin, like something sleeping. I scanned for signals. One came back, weak, corrupted, but unmistakable, a repeating loop of a single phrase. We speak to forget. It repeated every 90 seconds. No identifier, no origin point, just broadcast into the void over and over, like someone left it behind for me or someone who had been me. I suited up and descended. I don't know why. There's no reason to land on a world with no life, no air, no reason to exist. But I felt a pull. Not like gravity, like recognition. The surface was worse up close. The rock was smooth, like something had washed it clean long ago. And every 100 meters I found something buried just beneath the dust. A nameplate, rusting metal, bent, faintly glowing with residual charge. Most had names I didn't know, but some I did. Viel, Dren, Sierra, Juno, each one perfectly etched. And beside them, no bodies, just the faint outline of where someone once stood, like the world had recorded their final moment, like it had turned memory into landscape. Then I found a stone, not marked, not carved, just singing. A sound so soft I thought it was in my head, but I recorded it, played it back. It existed. It was hers, Sierra's voice, repeating a phrase I never heard her say in life. If no one remembers, then they never were. I should have run, should have climbed back into the shuttle and burned this place from orbit, but I stayed, walked deeper into the silence, because I needed to understand. Why me? Why us? Why this trail of names, signals, and half-dead places? At the edge of a cliff I found the monument. A tower, spiral-shaped, made of black voxcasters and shattered helmets. A ruin built from the memories of the dead. And at the top, a throne, empty but not unoccupied. I could feel it. A presence, not watching, listening, always listening, waiting for a voice to fill the void. I stood at its base and screamed, a real scream. My voice tore into the vacuum like a flare. No sound, but all intent, and the tower answered. Not in words, in names, thousands of them, spoken through my thoughts like a tide, names that I didn't know. But that felt familiar, as if they had been mine once, as if they had been everyone. One voice stood out from the flood, softer than the rest. Older, worn. This is where we end. This is where all who speak must fall silent. You are not the first. You will not be the last. I collapsed to my knees, not in despair, in understanding. This wasn't a war, it was a collection of names, of memory, of meaning, a library made not of books, but of forgotten souls. I looked up at the throne. It pulsed once, the signal changed. It wasn't broadcasting anymore, it was recording. Say it, the voice whispered. Give it, let it become truth. Say your name. I stood, blood in my mouth, dust on my visor, and I said the only thing I could. My name is Varn Aelric. I am the last who remembers, and I will never be forgotten. The tower cracked, the throne shattered, the world shook, but the voice remained. Fainter now, wounded, but still present. It wasn't dead, it never would be, because the silence doesn't die. It waits. I returned to the ship, burned the coordinates, deleted the logs. But I kept one thing from the surface, a single nameplate, unmarked, blank, waiting to be filled. I hung it on the wall above my bunk, and every day I look at it, because I know one day the silence will come for me again and ask me to write something there. But until then, that plate stays empty because I haven't given it my name. Not yet. The ship is shrinking, not in size, but in space. Corridors that once led to supply rooms now double back into the medici bay. The bridge door leads to the engine deck. Rooms I slept in are sealed, not by locks, but by absence, as if they've been forgotten by the ship itself, and memory is what keeps steel solid. I know what this means. The silence is inside, not as an entity but as unreality. It's rewriting the vessel by unmaking what I no longer think about. The less I remember, the less remains. So I speak constantly now. I narrate my every movement, out loud. Even when alone. I'm walking down corridor 3A, passing ration dispensary on the left, opening the bridge access panel, touching the throttle lever, feeling the grip. It's cold, slightly rusted. Not because I'm afraid of forgetting, but because that fear is justified. Yesterday I forgot the name of my home world. Today I almost forgot the smell of promethium. Tomorrow I might forget why silence is dangerous at all. The worst part is the names. They're changing one by one, not vanishing, mutating. Rulk Jorvan became Joran Rulk. Juno Kar now reads Karn Juno. Sira Ivanthi turned into S Ivanthi. Each change comes without warning. Sometimes it's on my wall scratchings, sometimes it's in my head. Once it was in my own voice. I played back an old audio log and I heard myself say, "This is Varn, Glitch, Arlen, not Elric, Arlen," and I didn't remember correcting myself. The logs are breaking too. Digital entries rearrange themselves into spirals, text reorders, turning prayers into riddles. Read one this morning that said, "He who forgets himself walks into the mouth willingly." Another just read, "Speak backward, silence forward." I deleted both, but they reappeared, on my skin, carved with light. For half a second, I saw them on my forearm. Then they were gone, but the sensation lingered, like memory had brushed past me, with teeth. I'm afraid to sleep now, not because of nightmares, because of the quiet. It's not real rest anymore. When I wake, the world feels lighter, thinner. And the first thing I do is check my name, over and over. Varn Aelric, Varn Aelric, Varn Aelric, until I'm convinced it's mine again. But this morning, something changed. A signal reached the ship, not from a system, not from a ship, not from the warp. It came from within the ship, a ping, a query, a single repeating request. Who are you? No coordinates, no encryption, no tone, just the phrase, spoken in neutral vox. Over and over and over. I tried to block it, scrambled the receivers, rerouted power to the void antenna. Didn't matter. It wasn't asking. It was inviting. Then it asked. Again, not over vox, not through audio. This time, in writing, etched on the walls outside my quarters in thick, dripping oil. Who are you? I answered. I had to. Wrote it in bold red ink. Varn Aelric, Recon 86th. Human. That seemed to stop it for a time. I slept for the first time in days, and when I woke, the wall had changed. It now read, yes. But who were you before that? That was the question that hit hardest, because I don't remember. Not truly. Not my full childhood. Not my first memory. Not the name I was born with. Only the one the guard gave me. Only the one the silence has learned. I've begun prepping the escape. Pod fuel, food, beacon. I've written my name inside it in 100 places. If this ship goes dark, if I go quiet, the pod will speak for me. That's the hope. The last voice I'll leave behind, because this isn't a battle anymore. This is a siege. The silence doesn't storm the gates. It waits, erases the road behind you, unbuild the foundation beneath your name, leaves you one question at a time until you answer with nothing. I check the pod every hour, every 30 minutes, every 10, just to make sure it's still there. And tonight, when I opened the hatch, I found a message inside, written on the bulkhead, in a hand that matched mine, but I never wrote it. You left already. This is just the version of you that stayed too long. The lights flickered. The pod door closed. Wouldn't reopen. The emergency override failed. I backed away, slowly, spoke my name aloud again. Varn Aelric. Varn Aelric. I am not the echo. The lights steadied. The ship sighed, and the walls were blank again. But I know now, the signal doesn't want an answer. It wants hesitation, because hesitation is permission. That's how it enters. That's how it takes. Tomorrow I burn the signal chamber, purge the Vox systems, not because I think I'll win, but because as long as I act, I still belong to myself. It can ask all it wants. It can whisper 1,000 names, but until I answer in silence, it hasn't won. And if this message ever reaches you, whoever finds it, write your name. Everywhere. Say it out loud when you're alone. Shout it if you must, because the only voice that beats the silence is the one that refuses to be erased. The signal room is gone, not sealed, not powered down, gone. The hatch that led there now opens to an empty black chamber. No walls, no ceiling, just absence. I threw a glow rod inside. It fell forever. No sound, no impact, no return. And I heard the whisper again from every surface. You're running out of things to remember. I tried to scream, not in fear, in defiance, but the sound didn't leave my throat. It buzzed behind my teeth like a jammed Vox transmission, stuck between syllables that had no shape. I punched the wall over and over until the pain reminded me I was still real. Later, I checked the ship logs. They had rewritten themselves again. The crew manifest now listed 4 names. All of them were mine. Aelric Varn Aelric. V. Ael. Designation, U. Each name assigned to a different part of the ship. One operated the bridge, one maintained the engines, one listened, and one watched. I deleted them all, overrode the system, scrubbed the ship's memory core. But when I rebooted, there were 5 names, and the 5th was Sira. I knew it wasn't her, not really, but I couldn't bring myself to delete it. Not again. That night, the dreams changed. They weren't memories anymore. They were future echoes, visions of who I'd become. I saw myself on a dead moon, kneeling in a cathedral made of Vox horns and bone. I wore the silence like a robe. My mouth was sewn shut, and yet I spoke through a choir of 1,000 names, each one begging to be forgotten. When I woke, I ran to the mirror in the crew corridor. The one I'd sealed off weeks ago. The welds were broken, the door was open, and inside, the reflection waited, still smiling, still silent, still me. But this time, it stepped forward, right up to the edge of the glass, tilted its head, and moved its lips. Heard it in my bones, we are the same. You just haven't stopped speaking yet. I fired my last pistol. The bolt didn't shatter the mirror. It passed through it. No heat mark, no distortion. Just gone. Like the shot had exited reality. Like it had been accepted. Then the reflection reached out, hand pressed against the other side of the glass, and from its palm, letters burned, "You are the last sound. When you're gone, we begin." I fled, back to the bridge. The door was closed, no controls worked, only a note carved into the panel. The voice has reached the end of the page. I wandered the halls for hours, maybe days. Time has no meaning anymore. The clocks have stopped ticking. The ship's power runs off something else now. Memory. Obedience? I don't know. Only that I can still move, which means I can still resist. Eventually, I reached the chapel. Not the ship's original prayer room. No, this one was new, grown like fungus between two bulkheads, built from cables, bones, Vox speakers, and rusted steel. At the center, an altar, blank, empty, waiting, and on the floor in front of it, a recording device, old, cracked, analog, tape still turning. It clicked on when I entered, and my own voice played. This is the part where I give in. Where I stop writing, where I stop remembering, but I haven't reached it yet. And as long as I haven't, you don't win. I stared at the altar. I could sit down, say nothing, end it. That's all it wants. Not devotion, not sacrifice, just surrender. The moment I stop making noise, it wins. It becomes me instead. I took out my knife, carved 5 words into the altar with my own blood. You can't keep all of me. Then I walked out. Didn't look back. Didn't wait for punishment, because I had just made something the silence couldn't unmake. A mark, a wound, a refusal. I made it back to the command deck. The lights flickered. The stars beyond the void glass had stilled. The ship had stopped moving, but I sat in the pilot's chair and began speaking again. Slow, soft, firm. My name is Varn Aelric. I remember Ralk's laugh, Viel's questions, Sira's stubbornness. I remember the sound of a bolt pistol firing, the scent of engine oil, the hymn we sang before breaching that cursed station. I am not done yet. I will speak again tomorrow. I saved the log, copied it 10 times, wrote it on the floor, the walls, my skin, because when the silence comes again, and it won't find someone waiting. It will find someone defying. I found a door today, a new one, mid-deck, portside, where nothing should be. No wiring ran to it, no bolts in its hinges. It wasn't carved or manufactured, it simply was. It looked like stone, black, pitted, ancient. But when I pressed my palm to it, it felt like flesh. And behind it, nothing. Not emptiness, anticipation. It didn't open, not at first, but when I whispered my name, Varn Aelric, it groaned, shifted, and split wide, revealing a staircase that shouldn't fit inside the ship. Descending farther than the vessel should go, as if the ship had grown a belly, and now it was opening its mouth. I descended. Because of course I did. Because that's what it wanted. Because some part of me needed to see how deep this lie went. Each step took something. I felt it. The first was my memory of my father's face. Then my favorite food. Then the way Sira used to pronounce my name. Just a little. Sharper than the others. Gone, gone, gone. But I kept walking because that was my choice, and that meant I was still me. The staircase ended in a chamber. Circular, black stone walls, smooth floor carved with spirals, no lights, yet everything was visible, lit from the inside, like the walls remembered what illumination meant. At the center of the room, a chair, no chains, no bindings, just waiting. I didn't sit, but I approached. There was a plaque on its backrest, carved in pristine Gothic. The mouth must close for the voice to begin. I backed away, but the room didn't let me go. Not physically, psychically. The moment I turned, I felt it crawl behind my eyes. A voice. Soft, patient. Sit, and the forgetting will stop. Sit, and we will tell you who you really were. Before the guard, before the prayers, before the stories, before the sound. I laughed like I hadn't since I first heard Rolk's panicked voice echo through the corridors of Theta 7. I said, I don't care who I was. I care who I am now. I care what I remember. The voice hesitated, a beat of stillness. Then you will remain broken. A record that skips. A wound that won't close. Voice no one listens to, I smiled. You're listening. And just like that, the room began to fracture. Not violently, not with light or heat. It simply peeled apart, like a thought erased mid-sentence. The chair dissolved. The spirals cracked. The plaque crumbled into dust, and the staircase behind me was gone. I wasn't back in the ship. I wasn't anywhere. Then I saw them, the others. Not as ghosts, not as memories, as refusals. Figures standing in the dark, some with faces, some without. Each one still intact because they had never let go. Recognized some, the preacher, Juno, Viel, even Syrah, their eyes locked with mine, not in welcome, in witness, as if to say, this is the cost of remembering. This is the shape of resistance. One by one they stepped back into the dark, leaving only one voice behind. Hers, Syrah. You're not done yet. I woke up gasping on the ship's floor, lights flickering, alarms wailing in patterns I no longer understood. The stairwell was gone. The door was gone. But the feeling wasn't. The memory hadn't faded, and my name was still mine. Written in soot, on the walls, etched into steel with broken nails, burned into my skin with a cauterizing tool. Varn Aelric, the ship whispered. We can still forget you. We can still make you quiet, I whispered back. Then try. I moved to the bridge, set a new destination. Didn't care where, didn't check the charts, because it isn't about where I'm going, it's about going, because the moment I stop, the silence wins. And if I can keep speaking, keep remembering, then I'm still louder than the dark. The ship isn't a ship anymore. It hasn't been for days. Its shape remains, engines, corridors, decks. But everything inside has changed. Rooms echo before I speak. Doors open before I touch them. The gravity bends around memory, not mass. This is no longer a vessel through space. It is a vessel through me, and I know the silence is close now. I feel it. Coiled just behind the next word I speak, waiting for a pause. I keep moving. I have to. The lights flicker in patterns I've come to recognize, not warnings, not failures. Punctuation. Every third flicker is a comma. Every long dim is a paragraph break. The ship is writing something, using me as its scribe. But I won't let it end my sentence. Not yet. Today, I found a voice recorder in the airlock vestibule. Didn't put it there. It was warm. Used recently. Inside one file, Syra Last Vox. I froze. I had already played that file back in part 22. This one was different. The timestamp was from tomorrow. Played it. Her voice filled the chamber, but it wasn't a log. It wasn't a farewell. It was a conversation. With me, a version of me I hadn't become yet. You finally brought the name to the edge, she said. Now you have to decide. Do you throw it into the dark or carry it across? Then silence. A moment later my voice replied, I'm tired, Syrah. I've been carrying these names so long I forgot which ones were mine. Good, she answered. That means you're still worth saving. I dropped the recorder, fell to my knees, because I remembered that moment. It hadn't happened, but it was about to. The silence doesn't erase linearly. It folds. It takes moments from before and after and feeds them into the now, until you're not sure if what you're saying is yours or a memory it planted in your mouth. I returned to the bridge, scanned for signals. There was one. Strong. Steady. Not from the warp. Not from Imperial space. From inside the ship. I followed it. Down. Into the engine room. Through a wall that wasn't a wall anymore, but a veil of silence stretched tight as skin. Behind it, the core. It had changed. No longer a plasma engine. Now it was alive, a pulsing organ of light and memory. It beat in rhythm with my breath. Slowed when I panicked, quickened when I spoke. I stood before it and whispered, "This ship runs on me now." The core answered in kind. It always has. Then it asked the question. Not aloud. Not in my head. In everything. "Do you want to stop?" And for the first time I considered saying yes. I closed my eyes, felt the weight of names pressing into my bones. Juno, Viel, Rolk, the preacher, Syrah. Even the ones I barely remembered anymore. They hurt now. Not with grief, with permanence. They'd stayed all this time because I hadn't let go, and if I did now, what would be left? So I opened my mouth and said, "No. Not until you remember me too. Not until the silence speaks my name back to me." The core cracked, the light dimmed, and the ship screamed. It wasn't noise. It was sound, every unspoken word, every swallowed prayer, every forgotten oath and nameless child. It poured through the halls like smoke with edges, tearing open panels, shattering glass, peeling back the false walls between now and then. I held steady, voice shaking, tears burning, and I whispered into the eye of the storm. "I am still here. I'm still loud. I am still me." The storm stopped. The core split in half, and from within it, a small metal box, unmarked, old, warm. I picked it up, opened it. Inside, a single parchment strip, 7 letters, handwritten, Siraev. Not her full name, just a sliver, but it hadn't faded, not after all this time. I held it to my chest, and for the first time in years, I cried for someone else, not for what I lost, but for what I kept. Then I heard the silence say something I never expected. "You taught us how to speak. Now we will remember you." I returned to the bridge. The stars had shifted. Now they formed a word, not in Gothic, not in any script I know, but I understood it. It said, "Not yet." The ship is quiet now, not in the old way, the crushing, soul-flaying silence that eats sound before it's born. This is something else, a reverent hush, like the air itself is listening. Like everything that remains aboard the Magna Vitae waits to see what I'll say next. For the first time, I'm not afraid of that. The stars outside no longer match any known system. They drift like ink in water, faint, fluid. Their arrangement is not celestial, it's linguistic. Not constellations, sentences. I follow them. The ship no longer uses coordinates. Instead, I read the stars like a paragraph, steering by memory and rhythm. Each course correction is a syllable. Each warp skip is a comma. And when I finally arrive, the sky stops. As if I've reached a full stop, a period at the end of something vast. And hanging before me in the void, a structure, unfathomably large, shaped like a closed mouth. It's not a station, not a vessel. It is a library, one without archives, without lights, without sound. It doesn't contain books. It contains forgotten truths. You don't enter it to read, you enter it to be remembered. The ship pulls close. No docking, no contact. I step forward into the boarding vestibule. Inside my chest, the slip of parchment with Sira's half-name grows warm. When I reach the edge of the airlock, the ship does something I didn't expect. It speaks. This is the last record. Please conclude the entry. I nod and say, Varn Aelric, last surviving guardsman of listening post, Theta 7, bearer of names. Voice of those who did not forget. The ship's doors open, and I step into the library without. Voices. There is no gravity, no walls, no time. I float through rooms built from language. Every corridor is a whisper, every door a question, and the floors, they're lined with names, millions, billions. Some are written in languages long dead, some in screams, some in sobs. All real, all remembered. I hear mine, spoken softly. Varn Aelric. Not from the walls, from behind me, I turn. And she's there, Sira. Not a ghost, not a dream, not whole, but real enough. Her eyes shine, her voice cracks. You carried me longer than I thought anyone could. Even when I started to fade. Even when you were ready to forget yourself to keep me alive. I reach for her hand. She nods and presses the slip of her name back into my palm. I have to leave soon, she says. Why? Because I'm not meant to stay. You are. I shake my head. I'm tired. She smiles. That's what makes you worthy. She walks backward into the dark, one step at a time, as if being unwritten, but her voice remains, a hum, a memory, a name. I wander them. Library taunt each room shows a part of me. I nearly gave up. Rolk's defiance, Viel's faith in logic, Juno's quiet warmth. The preacher's madness turned to purpose. Sira's unshakable will. Even the parts of myself I left behind. They're all here, carved into the stone, chanted in invisible air, preserved because I refused to fall silent. Eventually, I reach a final door. Above it, an inscription, the final entry. I pause, look down. In my hand, a pen, not mine, old. Steel-tipped, ink-fresh, the parchment unrolled before me, one blank line, waiting. Not for a history, not for a confession, just for one word. I write it with full heart, with full voice, the name I carried across every silence, Sira. The door opens, light floods through, not blinding, not burning, just real, and in it, I step forward, unafraid. The light beyond the final entry door is not made of photons. It is not illumination in the way a torch burns or a sun shines. It is made of memory, not mine alone. All of them. Every name I carried. Every name I forgot. Every name someone whispered once and never spoke again. They are here. They do not scream. They do not beg. They exist. And that is enough. When I pass through, I feel it for the first time. Peace. Not silence. Not absence. Not the cruel hush of the entity that hunted me across the stars. This is a peace that lives beside sound, that doesn't consume it, but holds it, gently, and waiting for me in the center of this impossible chamber is a single object, a book. Its pages are infinite, blank, but not empty. When I touch it, the ink remembers. Every word I spoke, every word I resisted, every scream I swallowed, they pour onto the page. Not as punishment, as proof. The library without voices is not without sound. It is what protects sound from being lost. And now, I am its final scribe. Do not know how much time has passed here. Perhaps none at all, perhaps forever. But I remember everything. The way Ralk laughed, even after he saw death. The way Viel whispered equations to calm himself. The way Juno always said, "You first," even when wounded. The way the preacher begged us not to listen, not because he was mad, but because he understood. And Sira, the way she always said my name like it mattered, and it did, because now it is not just a name, it is a story. I fill the pages, not with narrative, but with meaning, what it felt like to lose yourself, what it costs to bring someone else back, what it's like to scream into the dark and know something hears you, not because it answers, but because you are still echoing. That is enough. That is survival. Eventually, the room begins to close, not in hostility, like a closing chapter. And I know what I must write. The last entry, not an ending, just a punctuation mark to say, this was real. I dip the pen into nothing, because nothing is where stories begin, and I write. My name is Varn Aelric. I carried them. I remembered. I spoke. And I was never silent. The light folds around the ink. The page seals itself. The book closes. The chamber exhales. And somewhere in the cold places between galaxies, the silence pauses and does not speak, because it cannot take what has already been given meaning. I wake up on a transport vessel, low orbit over a green world. My clothes are intact. My hands are unburned. My mind is whole. I ask the medical where we are. They tell me, "You're lucky, traveler. We found your escape pod drifting near the edge of the system. No logs, no origin. But you were whispering something in your sleep. Just one word." I asked what it was. They say, "Sira." If this story spoke to you, if it echoed in the quiet places of your heart, then carry it forward. Speak the names of those you remember. Tell the stories of those who have none. Because in this grim galaxy, where gods are silent and monsters are loud, the only resistance left to us may be our voice. If you want more tales like this, whispers from the edges of sanity, horror, and memory, subscribe to Voidborn Terrors, leave a comment, share this story, let others know. The silence does not win when we remember. It ends when we speak.